2 seats up front. Raise your hand if you're sitting next to a seat that's open, please. Doesn't mean you have to come sit, just so that you know at least it's available. There's another one here. Hi. Okay, and we don't have seats for those in the back. So that is what we have. We'll wait just a minute for Karen and Kaylin to get here before we get started. And give everyone just one more minute. Del, it looks like there's a seat right over here. And you can give your form to Rachel.
So you can specify, and then there's some other limitations, but you can specify certain positions. Just don't get interesting because it's like it was that, and then yeah, he was.
Did you see Kaylin or Karen outside?
Right.
They might be looking for parking.
Not a true statutory. Right.
Danette said that Kaylin was either going up as she was coming down the rim or vice versa.
Okay. Hi, Karen. We're going to hold just one more minute for Councilmember Jones. There we go. Thank you all for coming. It's 7:01, February 12th, 2019. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start with the approval of the minutes. 2-1, approval of regular council meeting minutes, January 22nd, 2019. Is there a motion?
Move to approve is written.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tani. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Next is our mayor and council reports. So it's been three weeks since we've been together, and I'm sure that we all have a lot to report on. I myself have been quite busy. Give me just a moment here. Well, I'll just go off this. I attended the City Market grand opening. I did not win free gas. I also had a meeting with John Fogg with the Rotary Club to talk about the new artwork at the park and to get a deeper history about the Rotary Club and all that they've contributed to our community. I serve on the Association of Local Governments Board, and I represent our county, but also San Juan, Carbon, and Emery. And so I did attend that meeting that we had. I attended a meeting about Mill Creek. Last fall, I had a couple of focus groups here in the hall, as you all remember, and it has led to some really good meetings about planning the Powerhouse Lane, Mill Creek area and the protection of that resource. I attended the Winter Innovation Summit in Salt Lake. That was really quite incredible. There are a lot of resources, alternative resources that are available to us in our community. Specifically innovation funds, and the Sorensen Impact Center in Salt Lake really wants to bring that capital to Utah. And so it was very nice to attend that meeting with our new finance director and get a better scope of the money that's available to us in our community. As we all know, we don't have a property tax, and so we've got to be creative with our revenue. I have been attending, we're 2 weeks into the legislative session. I've been attending Rural Caucus on behalf of the city to be in touch with what other rural communities are discussing and connect with rural legislators. That's Friday morning at 7 a.m. at the Capitol. And then also, I have had the pleasure to host a lunch every Friday afternoon at the Capitol for the women mayors of Utah. There are 37 of us. And so we've been meeting and having lunch to talk about issues that are important in our communities, whether we're rural or urban or somewhere in between. And it appears that we all have the same issues that we're dealing with, whether the scale is large or small. Also, I attended Local Officials Day, and that was a way to connect again with our legislators. I had the opportunity to sit and talk with our representative, Senator Hinkins. And it's nice to know that we are represented and that we are connected to that legislator. In particular, I also attended the Silicon Slopes event that they have to celebrate tech and innovation. And I found out that a friend that I grew up with actually works for NASDAQ and invited me to be on the stage when they rang the closing bell at the Innovation Summit. So that was a very interesting thing to be a part of, but also gave me the opportunity to meet some really innovative thinkers and investors in our state. And then we also all participated in a retreat this past weekend, which was very important for us to get all on the same page about our work plan for 2019. And that's about it from me. Mike?
Yeah, so Ronnie is in Washington, D.C. on an UMTRA thing, is that correct?
Lobbying on behalf of our county, yes.
So she sends her regards. I'll just report on one thing. I've been going to county water meetings, GWSSA, and at the last meeting, the board there discussed at length how they're going to set their rates. They have an independent auditing agency that makes sure that they're qualified to get loans when they build new infrastructure. Turns out they need a little bit more money, and so they're talking about how to structure rates for different kinds of commercial and residential users and so forth. And the board was uniformly in favor of adopting conservation principles, and in particular, tiered structures for rates. In other words, you might get your first 6,000 gallons relatively cheaply so everybody can do brush your teeth and so on. But if you start getting more and more water, they were inclined to charge higher rates per gallon in an effort to cut down and conserve on water uses. And they have not had a public hearing on that yet, and they probably will get pushback. But the whole notion of charging more for scarce resources is one that's been around for a long time, and we'll see how that goes. So that is something that conceivably could come in front of the city as a point down the tube, as another tool to deal with finite water resources here in the area. That's it.
Thanks, Mike. Tony?
Okay, I too attended Local Officials Day at the legislature and visited with Senator Hinkins and Representative Albrecht, and I had a really good talk with Patrice Arendt. She kind of represents my old stomping grounds. And I discovered I do not like technopop.
It was loud.
It was very loud, and I decided I'm too old. And I also attended the retreat on Saturday.
Thanks, Tony.
So on, let's see here, the 30th of January, I attended the Moab Chamber Retreat meeting, and we have a new chamber president, which is Brendan Cameron, which is fantastic. If anyone was at the business summit yesterday, pretty dynamic individual we have in our community. And the chamber is looking at ways to implement changes, and so that we were focusing on goals and missions for the year. Customer service training and opportunities for businesses is going to be a huge priority. And I was asked to share from the chamber that they are looking to work collaboratively with our municipality and having a voice and a great working relationship. So I just wanted to pass that along to everybody. I briefly stopped into Rosemary's CPACE meeting that she hosted for local businesses for them to discover ways to finance their buildings to become more energy efficient. I attended a Moab transit meeting, and we had 2 UDOT representatives down, and one was the director of public transit, and he was invited to discuss with us appropriate funds that we would be able to apply for to offer public transportation in our community. So that's a discussion that hasn't happened yet.
I am just going to use that as an opportunity to say, please, I want to make sure that this hall is safe and inclusive. So while clapping feels really supportive, I want to make sure that we all keep our hands down and participate in a orderly manner. Sorry, Karen.
I'll sit on my hands too.
Thank you.
And on February 1st, I attended a recycling meeting up at the recycling center. Darren Starr from Grand Junction came to give us just some information about recycling. And I met with Evan and Chris from the Solid Waste District, and I want to just give a huge thank you to those guys. The recycling center looks amazing, so thank you for that. February 4th, airport board meeting. Recommendation we sent to the county for our board seat, and we went through priority projects for the coming year. Implementation for overnight parking at the airport will most likely begin in March or April, so you'll see information in the papers on that. I also attended the council retreat. Yesterday I was at a key leader board meeting with the school district, and we met to go over data from surveys from community events and the SHARP survey that's given to high school students, and to hone in on topics of what we can focus on to implement changes to creating a healthier community for our youth. So, and then today I attended another recycling meeting hosted by Sarah Melankoff with Bo Peck from the Utah Recycling Coalition president, who's gonna speak maybe tonight. And it was just, gave us some information about recycling in Utah. So that was it.
Thank you, Karen.
I spent Saturday with almost everyone at this dais discussing priorities for the coming year and in advance of our budget season.
Kaylin, will you do your microphone around your laptop?
Yes, I will.
Because I am told we need
Yes, we need to
Thank you very much.
project to our online audience as well as the fine folks in this room.
Thanks, Kaylin.
I went to a couple Moab Dark Skies meetings to discuss an open house that we're going to be having. That, Crystal, are you going to pitch that? I could. Okay. Okay. And went to a housing task force meeting, and we reviewed our accomplishments for the last 2 years, of which there are many, as well as worked on recommendations for all the implementation partners in the community. And City of Moab was the first recipient of recommendations, but there will be more coming. And Emily and I went to a discussion at KZMU yesterday, along with Sarah Melnikoff and Evan from the Solid Waste District, and we had an hour-long conversation about recycling. So continue that conversation, which has been vigorous. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Kaylin. We are now at the number 4, administrative reports. David.
Good evening. I just have a couple of small things to review really quickly, and then we're gonna. Well, I won't. Presumably, we'll talk a bit more about what's going to happen after that. First of all, Mayor and I just returned from a police sergeant promotion ceremony over at the Arts and Recreation Center, and I believe it was the first one of those ever done, and it was really special. And hats off to Chief Winder and to his staff. Assistant Chief Brett Edge in particular for putting together a really nice ceremony to celebrate the promotion of 3 sergeants in the Moab City Police Force, including an historic one. Jerry Newmeyer was our first female sergeant on the force, so that was really a special moment, and look forward to working with all of them moving forward. The second thing is I was at the League Policy Committee meeting yesterday up at the Capitol on behalf of the city. I think maybe one or two of you may have tuned in as well online. Just a couple of really quick items on the legislative front. The one that we are hearing not much about, but a lot of, not a lot of substance about, but a lot of potential hand-wringing about is what changes may be coming with how sales tax is charged and to whom, upon whom it is levied in the state of Utah. There's no actual bill out yet, but rest assured that the League is very much on top of it and paying very close attention to what may or may not happen with regard to how sales tax is assessed and or changed in the state. The other one that is very relevant for us is I think it's SB 34.
34 is the housing bill.
Housing bill, right. And so that one, it looks like it's progressing with a lot of participation by the League and the mayor. I know you've been involved in that a lot as well. And then the third one is potential changes to allow cities to have a little more say in where commercial routes for ATVs may or may not go. So a bunch of stuff going on up there, of course, and there are a number that are very relevant to Moab specifically, and it was nice to be able to get some of those updates and talk to people in person about it. So, and then the last thing is that the city of Springdale has indicated that they would be willing to host a fact-finding mission by the city of Moab and Grand County officials. If you are all interested, we're tentatively looking at a March 20th date for a possible field trip over there to spend at least a morning with the officials of Springdale. Why Springdale? A city that, while not Moab size, certainly experiences very similar issues to Moab, and how they've dealt with transportation and their main street being a state road as well is very relevant to our experience. And they've had some really interesting successes over the last few years in how they've managed their projects. So some UDOT folks and some others have indicated that that might be a really helpful experience for us and for you all to have. So I'll be sending you a little more detail about that, but very lightly maybe pencil in March 20th as a possible opportunity to be over there for a day and learn from those who have been through it.
Thanks, David.
Sure.
Is there another report?
Yes.
Is there one more report?
So in the way our agenda works typically, as most of you probably know from having attended these meetings in the past, that we deal with old business first, and then, well, we have citizens to be heard, and then old business is discussed, and then new business is discussed after that, and that will continue. However, in the interest of trying to communicate effectively and update you all on what's been happening over the last few weeks with regard to the waste hauling contract, we discussed that maybe during my administrative report, I would give the presentation, the update presentation that I was going to give during the old business item with regard to the waste hauling contract. And so that way you all at least have that information in front of you for those of you, maybe the one or two of you who are here to speak on that item on the agenda. So in the interest of having you hear the latest and greatest first before you speak at your Citizens Be Heard, if you're going to do that, I'll just jump right in if that's okay.
Thank you for reporting on this. And we've got a screen here, a screen up here, and then the council has one down here to look at as well. Okay. If you can't see the screen, please, I think there might still be some people in the hallway, so let's just take a second to organize ourselves. If you see people in the hallway, will you please invite them in? And then if you can't see from back there, but you'd like to see, please, feel free to come up. There's still some standing room over here. Never opposed to sitting on the floor. Is everybody good back there and can see?
Right.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Sure. So for those of you who were here at the previous meeting, a lot of this will be repeat with some updated information, but felt like it was important to provide a little bit of this information again for those of you who weren't here necessarily. So I'll jump right into it. Why are we here? Indeed, we are here because the franchise for the collection, transport, disposal of solid waste in the city That happens via, it's an ordinance, or I'm sorry, it's city code that basically says we have an agreement, we need to have an agreement in place with one provider. So the city has actually not gone out for formal proposals for a new or a different or the same provider in a long, long time, since 1999. So it's good public policy, good government practice to periodically go back out for through the formal solicitation process for these kinds of services. And then, like I said, that's what's in the city code. It shall only be collected by the approved contractor, and there's also a requirement that every residence and commercial establishment shall receive and pay for solid waste collection services from the city. If you live in the county, you may know that that's not the case, so that it's not a given that that is the case. But in the city of Moab, as within virtually every municipality in the country, that is the rule. So as we were starting to go through this process of developing the RFP, what were the goals, thinking about the need for quality service, the city has ambitious sustainability goals, and how do we provide value for the taxpayer? So just really quickly, service, these are some important values or things that came out of the response. Let me see if so we have sustainability goals, and these are some facts around sustainability that are relevant to us. In particular, one that I think is important to note is in a lot of places, landfill diversion is a pretty significant measure of how much energy is being used to deal with solid waste. And acknowledging Moab is a unique place. We are special, and we always know that we're special. But when you look at national averages, national rate of diversion is about 35%. That means that about 35% of people's so-called waste goes not into the landfill. And in Moab, that rate is much lower than that, almost half that. So, and again, related to that, greenhouse gases, how they are emitted is related to how waste is disposed of. Value is an important factor. If there are less upfront costs, that's better for the customer. It's nice to know that we have a history of performance in the bidder, and the city is a big customer on solid waste, and so getting a deal, a good pricing for city facilities is important, because city facilities is really all of us in the city and those who are visiting, and even those who don't live in the city but use city facilities. So maybe it would help if I just talked a little bit about the timeline that got us here, maybe, since that there's some people who weren't here previously and haven't been necessarily in all these discussions leading up to this. I believe the RFP went out in September. We came back to, the council reviewed that and gave us final approval on the RFP back then. The council reviewed the one response that we got, the one qualified response, which was from Monument Waste, who's the current provider, in November, and then said to staff, all right, go forth and get this franchise agreement worked out, bring it back to us, we'll talk about it and hopefully approve it. So that's been the process in a very small nutshell up to date. So let's just talk about what's happened since the last time we talked about it as a group, the council and staff. We've made some changes based on your feedback, and again, note that these are proposed changes. Ultimately, you as a council can decide what you want to decide, of course, but based on your feedback, the latest version of this agreement reflects the following. Residents will have the option with regard to recycling services. The way it's structured now, it's an opt-out, so that if you don't do anything, you will be assessed, a resident would be assessed for recycling services and would receive a recycling card and would have the every other week service. The other interesting development, I think, that a lot of you were asking about as council members is how can we basically have more options for how much garbage or trash is picked up at a residence. And while it's not as practical for Monument Waste or the service provider to provide a number of different bin options, in some cities you go to, you'll see there's like a little, 12-gallon version, there's 20-gallon, I don't know the exact sizes, but there's a whole range of these bins. In Moab, that doesn't make as much sense for a few reasons. One, we have a lot of wind, and they're a little bit harder to administer. Frankly, there's a different level of startup costs associated with them. Upshot being that Monument Waste's, counter proposal was, instead of having 3 or 4 different bin sizes for garbage, for trash, what if we give residents the option of having every other week pickup? So if you are somebody who doesn't fill up your garbage can every week, you could choose to have every other week service and pay a reduced rate for that service. So that is an option that is built into the contract. And let's see, on the commercial side, there was a small reduction basically in the pricing schedule for recycling to further incentivize people to participate in recycling to the degree that's possible. So in addition to that, at your request, we added a mandatory annual rate review by the council, and that just simply is an opportunity for you as a council to evaluate whether the rates are where they should be. That means that, for instance, if the price of aluminum to resell in the market goes through the roof and it would justify maybe a lower rate, that's an opportunity to look at that. If gas prices go to $5 a gallon and everybody is not happy, that would be an opportunity to evaluate whether the rates need to reflect that. So that's that annual process. The latest version also memorializes that commercial rates, if approved, would begin March 1st. Residential rates would still only start June 1st. And then one council member requested that we just make it clear that when we're talking about residential requirements or residential programs, that certainly includes multifamily developments and not simply single-family homes or duplexes for that matter. So it's a little hard to see. This is in the packet as well and online, but this is the updated rate pricing schedule that we have here, and you'll see. I think I did a fancy thing there. Yeah. Look at those skills. This is where we integrated in the biweekly or it's every other week. That's the same thing, I guess. Option there for trash pickup and comparing that to the rates for one time a week garbage pickup for either a 65 polycart or the 95. And 95 is what everybody has today, so just for a frame of reference. Let's see. And then I put together just a couple of slides to show you all, and the audience, of course, what this means in real life. So currently, the rates, $17 a month. Recycling, if you use Green Solutions, was $12 or $10, depending on how much they were able to service, but I believe 12 is generally the number we've been working with. Currently, you don't have an option. You get trash pickup once a week. You may use it once a month, don't matter. They're driving by once a week, like it or not. And then currently, I believe the Green Solutions, this is for residential service, is at every other week, and you get one cart size, the big green ones. So with the proposal or the agreement as it's written today, these are the range of prices that would be available to people. So if you had a small trash can and you only wanted service every other week and you did not want to recycle or use the recycling bin service, it'd be $12 a month. That's a significant change from what the current charge is. If you had, I guess I could read all those, but you can also see them. The upshot is if you went to maybe at the other end of the spectrum, if you had a large 95-gallon trash container and you also were participating in the recycling program, your bill would be $30 a month. So there's a whole range there of pricing options depending on what level of service people might wish, if that's the direction you wanted to go. So, and then this is a list of things that in Moab with this program would be able to go into the recycling polycart. It's been, I will flag that this is a different list. Like this is not the list you're probably used to. And it's a more comprehensive list than a lot of places use in Utah in particular. But this is based on what is serviceable through Monument Waste's relationships and their processes and connections through Grand Junction and then on to Denver. So, we're Moab, we're special. Always. And this is probably a placard or a banner that you will see a lot of in the coming months and years. So you saw it here first, folks. There it is. And I believe that is it. So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for going through that. And to just be very clear that that is what is currently being considered. I'm just really curious. I'm just going to do it. Raise your hand if you went to the city council and you read the packet and you saw the materials that David just shared with us, if you don't mind. Yeah. And saw the materials that are being discussed tonight. Thank you all for doing that. It's nice to have fact-based conversation about stuff. David, thank you so much for that report. Okay, are there any other reports, administrative reports for tonight?
That'll do it.
Okay, thank you. We're on to section 5, presentations. 5.1, the Mayor's Student of the Month Awards for Helen M. Knight Elementary School and the Moab Charter School for January 2019. Thank you all for coming so that we can celebrate Noah and Jack and David. Come on up. Rachel. Okay, everybody, let's go center. Come here. Come on over. We're short. Okay. Let me just do this. We do not have a certificate for Ian, but I tell you what, Ian, come on up, because he's here too. Everybody, come on over here so everyone can see. Come on around. So it's so exciting for us at City Hall to honor our Students of the Month. And as some of you may know, you also get a financial award, thanks to Mayor Dave, of $50 each for being incredible students. But we know that's not why you do it. So, without further ado, whereas the staff and faculty of the Moab Charter School and HMK on a monthly basis select a student of the month based on the student's citizenship and their involvement within their school, and whereas it is the desire of the city of Moab to foster and recognize the contributions of the young people of this community in regards to good citizenship. Now, therefore, the city of Moab joins with the Moab Charter School and HMK in recognizing the following. David Bonfiglio. Which one's David? Hi, David.
Also, it's Bonfiglio, not Bonfiglio. Bonfiglio.
Thank you. Noah Leprod. Did I Afraid. Jack Cloward. Did I pronounce it? Oh, here you go. Here's your pen.
You know this?
So, I owe you. Here's that. We'll get the certificate and the pin to you. So the reason why we have so many and why there was a little confusion about you is because we're celebrating a little bit of January and a little bit of February here. But it really is with my and the council's deep pleasure to recognize all of you for being outstanding. Thank you so much and keep up the good work. And this is where I invite folks to come up and say awesome things about these kids. So who wants to go first? Good evening. I'm Carrie Ann Marinelli. I'm the director of Moab Charter School, and I have the pleasure this month of joining you folks in honoring our Jack and David here. Jack, a little bit about him. His mom is on our school board, and so he ends up at school a lot more than normal kids. And every time he is pitching in. He's shoveling. He's coming in the office and asking what he can do. He's picking up balls. He's picking up trash. He's just tidying up, and he's helping out, and he has really been an outstanding citizen at our school, and so we want to say thank you, Jack. And Davey, as we know him, David he's the guy you want on your team. Do you remember being in school and being on those teams, and that one person's like, you got it. Hey, you didn't make that one, but next time, you got it, man. That's Davey. Every single time without fail, he is there cheering on everybody, and I want Davey on my team forever. So we had to recognize him for that, and he just is an outstanding human being and always there cheering everyone else on, including himself. And, sometimes we don't make it, and it's just okay because we've got another chance. So thank you, Davey, for being on our team. And Jill? Thanks to the educators, too.
All right. I'm the vice principal over at HMK Elementary, and Miss Kay couldn't be here tonight because she's really, really sick. But so Ian is our February Student of the Month, and I will just read to you what his teacher, who also could not be here tonight. Oh, Ian, I had it right here. Let's see. Okay.
It's true. The sickness is going around HMK.
It is pretty bad.
Thanks for
Okay, so his teacher is Christy Nichols, and she said, I would like to nominate Ian Ellis for HMK Student of the Month. Ian always enters the classroom with a cheerful attitude and smile. He is enthusiastic about learning and genuinely interested in each subject. In addition, Ian's kind-hearted actions towards his peers is wonderful to see. Ian readily volunteers to help teachers and students without being asked. Ian is a great role model for other sixth graders, and I have to say that because I also had Ian when he was in second grade. So I've known Ian since he was just a little guy. And then I believe, Noah, your teacher, no? You want me to do it? Okay, well, and I don't have that because this was February, and so I don't have January's. But I know Taryn, Miss Kay, wanted to say congratulations to both of you, and she's so very proud of you. All right, thank you.
Thank you all. You want to take a picture together? Okay, let's do it. Just right here. I sometimes drop the mic unintentionally. Yeah. Okay, let's get together. And smile big and say cheese. We've got one more presentation before we get into Citizens to be Heard. So families and teachers and friends, you can stick around, but we won't fault you if you want to take off and spend that money on ice cream or get dinner because it is a school night. Thanks for coming out tonight. Congratulations. We've got one more presentation. We're at 5-2, presentation by Faith-Based Coalition. Dick, would you like to come up? My intention was to have you sit here. Will that work?
Sure.
Okay. Be sure to speak into the microphone. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you for having us. I'm here to represent the coalition. I chair that coalition, and we just want to address the rate increase imposed on the church community for sewer and water this last year. And having met a couple of times with different people from the city, we understand that the council did not take into consideration the church community's contributions to the citizens of our community and also for transients. So I prepared a copy, or we collectively prepared a copy of these services that you have in front of you right here. In the interest of time, read it at your leisure if you want. Also, I need to say that this only represents a portion of the churches and services provided here in Moab. And I know when you look at this, and you're going to look at that total dollar value that's on this sheet, people are going to say, wow, what's the big deal? They have plenty of money. But these dollar figures are representative monies from private donors for specific ministries that the churches do. Some dollars are represented by partnering with other faith communities, actually in other states as well, and throughout the state of Utah. And these high sewer and water rates come directly from each church's operating budgets. And some churches' sewer and water rates specifically have been for 2 months higher than they all were for the whole previous year. And some even higher than that. So obviously these rates put a burden on the many churches' ability to provide many of the services listed on this summary sheet that you have in front of you. And I have to say, some of these services will probably have to go away. Churches just can't afford it. The city or county does not provide many of these services, and we were told that we were lumped together with other nonprofit organizations, and it doesn't really work because churches cannot apply for grants like other nonprofits do. We are exempt from doing that. And we were also been told that the reason for the change is because churches cannot be placed in a separate entity. But we already were in a separate entity and was taken out and placed in a different entity, which I'm sure took some time and effort. So we are here as a faith community to ask the council to reconsider putting the churches back to the status we were in. We understand the need for rate increases, and we really support the new sewer system, the new sewer plant. But 10 times the rate just seems a little high to most churches. It's a burden. When one of the churches' water and sewer bill exceed the 2 months, for 2 months for the whole entire year, previous year, it's just cost prohibitive. It's going to put a lot of things out of order. Bruce is going to address this in just a moment, but I want to briefly address something else that was presented to our coalition by the council, and it was specifically stated that the council, when I asked about the consideration of taking into consideration all the things that the faith community does for the citizens of this community, we were told that the council was actually agnostic to the faith community. And I just want to say that we are part of this community, and we provide a valuable service to the people of Moab and to the county. And like I said, these services that you see in front of you, for the most part, go out to people who don't even attend church. These are most of them transients, a lot of them, and mostly local families and transients that call for us for help. And the cost savings to taxpayers and city and the county, just for instance, in recovery alone, if you take one person off the street that is struggling with addiction, the cost saving is enormous. If you consider law enforcement time, jail time, court costs, and all of those things, you can hardly calculate. And we've taken many of these people that are struggling with addiction, and we've placed them in recovery homes. We're connected with 13 recovery homes in other states. And they're off of our streets here. And I guess my question is, and I again want to say thank all of you for allowing us to come and talk, but I just don't know what we're going to do, and I guess my question is the city prepared to take on the costs that the churches can no longer provide to the citizens and the transients that come through our community? Because we get calls every day. 3 today for me, specifically. So thank you, and I'm going to ask Bruce to come up, and he's going to address the specifics of some of this. Okay?
Thanks, Dick.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you all, because it's, I know that we want to support everyone that comes up to speak, and there may be times where we agree, and there may be times when we disagree. So what I'd like for us to do is give everybody a safe place to speak and refrain from clapping, please.
Thank you for letting us be here this evening. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. We do support the, I don't want to break it this time. We do support the sewer system and the new, I waited a long time to get a new sewer plant in this town. I'm really grateful for it personally. And we know that the rates have to be raised to pay for that. They were below what they should have been. However, the large increase in sewer rates is a major issue for churches. It's caused a significant impact on their community welfare programs. Lots of issues could be discussed, but those can become rabbit trails, so I crossed out a lot of what I was going to say and what was said by, have been said before. The real issue is proportionality. That's because that's what the study stated that you based your new rate system on.
Sorry about that, you guys.
No worries. Everybody's looking for a place to lean back there. No worries. Keep going, Bruce.
Can you hear me back there? I can talk louder.
No, it's just the light was accidentally turned off.
You're doing great.
Keep going.
So the new rate system is based on a study, which most of you probably are familiar with this study, one of 3 by consultants for the city. And it says, to quote, the essential principle of this method of establishing rates is that sewer rates should be recovered from customers in proportion to the cost of serving customers. And that's page 1.1 in the executive summary, and it's repeated several times in this and the other studies. So the city really needs to change the sewer rates for nonprofits and churches based solely on the charges being in violation of the city's own rate guidelines.
Okay. So, Bruce, I'd like to ask you something. Are you planning to also talk about the services that the coalition provides, or are we just talking about rates here?
We're just going to talk about this.
Okay.
Now, the services, I think you can see, Dick's Church alone has ranged for over $1.5 million worth of rehabilitation services that are contributed from out of state, but they help our city. You'll see that as you look through it, that there's a large amount of money involved, but there's a huge amount of volunteer time. All churches are involved with service. So the charges that are totally disproportionate to the cost of providing the sewer service for indoor water use, hence sewer use. It's indoor water use that we're trying to use water as a proxy for. And I don't know if there's any other way short of installing sewer effluent meters, and we're not going to do that. But it's indoor water use that we need to look at. There's no evidence that indoor water use by churches varies by season or the other nonprofits in town. So many other users besides residences, which are different, can create more costs to the sewer plant during the 9-month tourist season here in town. And they get, commensurately, they get revenue increases to offset the higher sewer rates, but not churches and most other nonprofits. Green space watering does not go to the sewer plant. In sum, setting up a category for all nonprofits based on winter water use average would more accurately reflect indoor water use and therefore sewer use year-round. There would still be an increase in charges from what they were a couple years ago, but one proportional to actual uses, actual costs incurred by the system. That's the essence of our request.
Thank you so much for speaking and coming to make this presentation. What wasn't talked about was what, as a group, the Grand County Faith-Based Coalition does provide. So this council was provided with a list of services and a $sign to that, and maybe we can put that out to at least put it on the table, make it available to those, because that certainly is something to be grateful for. Okay, thank you both for that presentation. And moving right along, we are now in section 6.
Mayor, may I interject one
Citizens to be
request?
heard.
I'd just like to request a meeting with staff to clarify the rationale behind what we're doing with these guys, so I can understand better if we're doing what we're.
Well, we always talk about rates during the budget process. Would that work?
So we can talk about that during budget open? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm looking for little blue pieces of paper. Start, okay. And there's not too many, so we'll go through this. Here's the rules. Here are the rules. You get 2 minutes. Rachel is going to monitor this. Everybody gets 2 minutes. You're all incredibly important, and I want to make sure that everybody has the same amount of time so that we are equal in our allotted time. But also, again, I want this chamber to be safe, and so I do ask you to refrain from clapping or cheering. If you're happy, tweet about it, put it on Facebook. Give a nod to the person next to you, but please, it is really important that everybody feels safe to speak how they feel. So I've got a stack here. If anybody is emboldened to speak as well about any topics, just please fill out one of these blue forms and then hand it to Rachel. You will get to speak if you have a blue form. And we will begin with J.W. Nelson, who wishes to speak. Please come up.
I don't know very many people. I know more about the graveyard than I know here.
Thanks for coming tonight. Please take a seat, state your name, and you get 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes.
Okay, when's it start now?
Right now.
My name's Jim Nelson. I've lived here for 44 years. My dad bought a ranch out here 44 years ago. I was here whenever Moab was Moab. And grant you I accept the changes. And I just want to say something on the behalf of the churches. Old Charlie Steen, I had the opportunity to know him. And his vision was certain things, churches, anything that people had to help people, he was there to help them. Like I say, he give all the property to the churches, because that was one thing. He had a lot of, I don't know what the word I want to say is, respect for it, because he knew it was good for the community. And I think you guys ought to, city council, I'm not here for the churches so much. I just think that you guys ought to consider them to help them in any way you can. I'm here on behalf of the garbage. I read the paper, and I own a trailer court, and it's low income, very low income. And the people there, I raised it the last time when you guys raised the water, garbage, and sewer on me last time. I just passed that on to them. And some of them really struggled. And now, it's winter time, and they're having a hard time. And I've just got to pass it on to them. I haven't passed on the tax increases on them. I've held that. And I unplugged the sewer line myself. I can't afford a plumber to come out and do it. If somebody's electric don't work, I go fix it. And these are things that I try to do to keep them rates down for these people. I have the opportunity to sell this property. And I was offered quite a bit of money for it. My brother sold out, as you guys know. You bought him out. And I've had the opportunity to sell. The people, I said, what do you do with my people? They says, oh, we'll give them 90 days, and then we'll start evicting. I says, then it's not for sale. These are people that my folks cared for time's up. Sorry.
Time's up.
Anyway, I just want to encourage you not to raise the rates on me.
Thanks, Jim.
I just have to pass them on. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you. Council for letting me talk too much.
Kylie, you're up. Barbara, you're on deck. I will ask if you are willing to condense. We do probably have an hour and a half's worth of citizens to be heard here.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Hello, I'm Kylie Miller. I'm a 20-year resident of Moab. I'd like to say thank you all for serving our community, and here are some of my thoughts. Moab is on the map. We get plenty of free advertising. For example, a huge article just recently in Outside Magazine. Social media takes care of this as well. Why are we spending $3 million a year of TRT revenues on advertising to lure more people here when we are experiencing so much overcrowding now? Why not spend some of this promotion money on educating visitors about our fragile desert and how to act responsibly in it? This should include wise water use. Remember, we're still in a severe drought. Also, how to properly put out campfires, stay on trails, and how to properly shit in the woods. Maybe the Travel Council could work on other creative and progressive ways of spending the TRT revenue to help ease the impacts on our community instead of exploiting it. Over-marketing of Moab goes beyond destroying our way of life. It's creating the most severe issues Moab has to deal with. Lack of water, affordable housing, waste recycling, impacts on wild places, and now Sitla plans on adding 3,500 new homes and adding close to 10,000 new residents in the next 10 years by creating a separate city on their 5,000 acres south of town. No need for ruining Moab with blanket high density when Sitla's gonna ruin the valley for us. They're also planning on building a Love's truck stop gas station on Highway 191, sandwiched between Sunny Acres Lane and the Moab Business Park. We cannot trust Sitla. We don't need more hotels or nightly rentals or resorts. We need to put the brakes on, and this moratorium is a start, and I fully support it. We need to stop advertising Moab. We need to stop this runaway train. We as a community need to take a stand and protect this amazing place we call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie. Barbara Finkham? Not sure how to pronounce your last name. You're up. Carol, you're on deck. I apologize for not pronouncing last names correctly. Well, and as somebody who's always struggled with this.
Very simple. I come from areas that have a lot of people. This is the smallest town I've ever lived in. I do recycle, and it seems that the more politically or favorably things that come up, we need to do them first. We need to do them real early. I can see recycling, but I can't see making it mandatory. And if you want to talk about us having so many visitors, they should be paying too.
Thank you. Carol, you're up. Carol Mayer. Donnie, you're next.
Thank you. I'm Carol Mayer, and I think this is representational government at its best. This small town, and we get passionate about things, and we show up and let you know. And this is what grassroots is all about. If we don't stem the crush of tourism, the increasing tidal wave of people and their toys certainly will increase destruction to the land by movement further and further into the backcountry, increase all forms of pollution in the valley, increase the need for more low-wage service positions, increase the gap between service workers and the housing for them, increase local citizens' dispute about the future of neighborhoods, densities, and whose rights should prevail, increase the need for law enforcement, fire protection, and emergency service personnel, and housing to entice them to Moab, increase the inconvenience around food, because grocery shopping and restaurant experiences are becoming abominable for locals and visitors alike. Increase road rage by the enormous increase in traffic and decrease of parking options for locals and tourists alike. Increase the negative measures to manage skyrocketing attendance numbers at national and state and county parks. Unofficially, the tally of existing hotel rooms and nightly rentals is 3,895. Plus 541 new units in various stages in County Planning Department and another 595 units in Moab City Planning. Let's do the math. There's 5,031 proposed or existing units. We figure these units hold between 2 and 10 people. The average is 5. Let's do the math. That's an average of 25,155 additional people in our valley. I plead with the city. I plead with the city, please.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Donald Kiffmeyer. you're up. Terry Howe, you're next on deck.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Donnie Kiffmeyer, and thank you very much for all the work that you guys do. I really appreciate it. I really do. I think what I'm here to talk about is the idea of making recycling mandatory, and I understand some of your thinking on it, but we also know that it is a private industry that is actually going to be doing the recycling, the collection, as Green Solutions did too. In that case, the city didn't need to get involved because it was an opt-in process. Why can't, I'm sure this is just a rhetorical question, since you're probably not going to answer any questions right now, but to consider, why can't Monument Waste actually do that on their own, where they can offer it as a business thing, rather than the city being involved with it at all? I noticed in a couple of things in the bullet list, the changes since the last briefing. The second bullet list talked about mandatory opt-out and opt-in, and I didn't see anything recently about an opt-in, which I think would be a much better way of doing this rather than making people do it mandatorily. The recycling list that was presented on there that they say they're going to be doing is also the exact same stuff that they take at the center, they have in the past, and they will be in the future as well. So it's not that we're gaining anything by not using our own recycling center. My other thing, I'm very aware of carbon footprint issues, and I know that we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint in many ways, and the way that we want to do is put less stuff into our landfill. But by taking this stuff and taking it to Denver, where it looks like a large percentage, or at least a percentage of it, is going into a landfill in Denver, aren't we increasing our footprint by shipping it that far? Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thanks, Donnie. Terry Howe, you're up. Oh, and Lenore Beeson, I don't know if you're speaking together. Oh, good. And Khaki, you're on deck. Oh, all right. Well, then you're splitting your 2 minutes together. Share 2 minutes, too. Thanks for coming.
I've been here before, I think 2 or 3 times, about the traffic on 100 North and 200 North. Well, I finally got together, and I'll read the petition first. There goes my 2 minutes already. We, the undersigned, are petitioning to have speed limits changed on some of the city streets. The streets are from North Main to 100 Northeast to 400 East, 200 Northeast to 200 East, 100 East between 100 Northeast and 200 Northeast, 200 East between 100 and 200 East, Northeast. Mm-hmm. There's a high volume of traffic on these streets, and it's a very congested situation from traffic following the businesses. The coffee shop, the exit from the hotel onto 100 North from Main Street, Moonflower, the alleyway from the post office, Cocapelli Apartments, the Ranger's office, Southeastern Title Company, the Mark, the police department, and ambulances exiting from 200 East onto 100 North. We'd like to see the speed limit from 200 East to Main Street on 100 North reduced to 15 miles an hour, and try to get us some kind of signs designating that's a school district. There's the Montessori school and the preschool on 200 East, and people drive. There's no stop signs on 200 East. It's a yield sign. I've tried to back out of the driveway where I live, and everything looks clear, and all of a sudden there's a car coming out of 200 East, and
so your time is up, but I really, your time is up. I appreciate can we leave this with Rachel, please?
I've got 7 copies here
Thank you.
of the petition.
Okay.
We've got 60 signatures in a 2-block area, so that's telling you what the neighbors all think.
I appreciate this initiative.
Extremely dangerous, just so you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's got to be done, something done before the terrorists come this summer.
Thank you.
Diagonal parking sucks, just saying.
Thank you. Khaki, you are up, and Jay, you are on deck.
Hi, I'm Khaki Hunter. And now I know why I'm not a city council person. There's a lot of work. So at first, I'd like to say that I'm really glad that I've heard the changes being made, that you did respond to the community about mandatory recycling. And I'm really glad about that. Just for the record, I do prefer an opt-in version instead of an opt-out, like Donnie had suggested. I think it's more democratic, and I think it would just simplify things in general than the rigmarole of trying to meet the time schedules and everything of when you can opt out and when you can't. And anyway, that's just my reflection on that. I'm hearing a lot of support from city officials in making monument waste single stream, using monument waste services. But I'm not hearing much about the support for the recycle center, which is currently under new management. And it's fully staffed. It's currently accepting a multitude of recycling materials, including glass bottles, jars, mixed colored office paper, catalogs, hard and soft cover books, toilet paper, paper towel, rolls, egg cartons, beer carriers, and cereal boxes, cardboard, plus aluminum and tin cans, number 1 and number 2 plastics, and more. The center plans to accept more items as it continues to grow. It is an absolutely free service. And I really, really would love to see the city and the county work together to improve the services and expand the services at the recycle center. We had a meeting today at the Moonflower with Bo Pack here. And a lot of people were there really excited about it, and that was the thing we felt was missing, was this link between the city and the council. And
Thanks.
I hope you can get that shit together.
Thank you, Khaki. Jay, you're up, and George Johnson, you're on deck.
My name's Jay Prentice. I've lived here 18 years. I hope to live another 18 years. I brought some bills with me. In the 5 years I got between two bills here, sewer's gone up $12.25. That's more than double. Water's gone up $4.07. After $6, that's almost double. If we add that up with the $13 proposed for mandatory recycling, in the 18 years I hope to continue to live here, that would be $6,354 we're all paying. Now, I appreciate the council being aware of recycling and our needs. I recycle. Many people recycle. Every time I recycle, I see other people at the recycling center. I think charging people like me, who are living on a limited retirement, $13 a month for something that's absolutely unnecessary for my purposes is wrong, is not fair. And I'm sure I'm not the only retiree living on a pension or retirement in this town. There are also many people, families raising kids. $6,000 over 18 years, that's the amount of time it would take for a child to reach adulthood. That's a big chunk of pay for someone who doesn't have the money to feed their kids. If I got David right and that the recycling is going to be an option, I applaud that. If it's not going to be an option and we're forced to do something that just basically raises our rates when it doesn't pertain to us and doesn't help individuals that already recycle, that's not fair and that's not right.
Thank you, Jay. George. And on deck is Mike. Maybe related.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I urge you at this time to keep the recycling volunteer. I recycle. There are too many, as the gentleman before me said, there are too many in this town who are fixed income or low income. Many of the kids, the low income kids, are having troubles. There's a backpack program for the elementary schools where food is donated. This brings me to the plastic bag ban. We used those plastic bags to send that food home with those kids. Now they're having to buy garbage bags or different things to get that food home to those kids. Those kids don't get a meal or two on the weekend, so it's very important, and you've damaged this program quite a bit by doing that. I urge you, instead of, well, I'm surprised you didn't just ban the cardboard and the glass and everything else like you did the plastic bags. The city market had a recycling program in place. Many of us recycled those plastic bags. So keep the garbage on a volunteer, the recycling on a volunteer basis. Help the families out. If you want to do the fuzzy feel-good things, donate money and food to the schools so they can send it home with kids that aren't getting a meal on the weekend or 2 meals. I urge you to do that. As far as the Dark Sky Initiative, another fuzzy feel-good thing, now I see the city workers going around putting shades up or spraying the lenses on the streets lights, causing the lights to be dimmer and making our streets more dangerous and harder to get around. And it's hard for bicyclists and walkers to be out on the street when they can't be seen.
Thank you, George. Mike Johnson, and Mayor Dave is up next.
I appreciate the opportunity, being given the opportunity to talk, but I'm going to forego my time.
Thank you. Dave Sackerson? What? Jessica Fawn. And Wayne, you're up next.
Hello, I'm Jessica Fawn. I feel passionately about source, sorted, voluntary recycling. I speak for the old, of which I am. I speak for the poor, of which I am. I cannot afford that mandatory price. I speak for the ocean, who cannot afford at least half of our recycling sent over it and possibly endangering the ocean to go to Asia. And I speak for the gentle Asians who have to receive our single stream recycling. And what a fun job that is. So I also say we have spent so much money advertising Moab. It's enough. Let us use some of that travel council money and pay people to recycle, give them coupons, educate the poor about recycling. Somehow we're nickel and diming ourselves into oblivion. Anyway, thank you. Please remember the non-rich.
Thank you. Wayne? And who's on deck? Sue.
I'm Wayne Hoskison, and I'm here to speak in favor of doing a 6-month moratorium on new overnight rentals. I think it's a great idea, and as we've heard, there's a lot of people have trouble living here, and that's part of the reason why we need to be doing this, because we need to be focusing on housing for our residents during that 6 months, figuring out how we're going to be able to keep housing people for the next who knows how many years, because that's a problem and it's getting worse. And so thank you, I support that.
Thank you, and thank you for your service on the Planning Commission. Sue? And up next is Sarah.
Sarah should go first. My name is Sue Alamand. I firmly believe in recycling, and I do. When you gave the sustainability report and said how many people recycle here in Moab, did you take a survey or something? Have you actually taken an account of the number of people that recycle?
There's a lot, Sue.
I'm sorry, what?
I said there's quite a few. I mean,
Yeah, I know, and those figures seemed rather low because I know so many people that do.
It was probably numbers from the, that were reported of people that signed up for curbside recycling through Green Solutions.
Okay, but that doesn't count for the hundreds of us that recycle our own. Now, I live alone. I'm a widow. I make this much garbage. If you're going to take this much for garbage and this much for recycling, will our garbage fees go down? We can only send it one way or the other. We can't send it, you can't tax us twice for the same thing. I met last week with 24 seniors, women, widows. How much garbage do you think we make? I can't fill that garbage can. But I do know people who come in from the valley, not all of them, but some, and use a dumpster, whatever dumpster they can find, either at their business or at the park, or come down my street and use my garbage can because she said, oh, well, you never fill your garbage can. So these people aren't paying. We are carrying the cost for people who are not paying for their garbage. Couldn't the city work with the recycling center? It's not shipped as far as Denver. It's 100 miles less to ship it to Salt Lake. I mean, we're duplicating the same services when we have a recycling center. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you are up, and Bo, you are on deck.
Hi, Sarah Melnikoff. I'm exhausted by this whole thing by now, but I do want to just reiterate that I think it's very important for the city to pause and have an official study done by experts of the whole waste stream, bringing in all the entities instead of one entity acting on their own. If it's an opt-in, which I think is better because of seniors who, like me, might be losing their memory sometimes, they might be stuck with it and not know what's going on. But if it is opt-in, I'm going to start the most innovative, fun, inclusive, come on up to the Recycle Center projects that you've ever seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Bo? Terry Marshall is on deck.
Thank you, council members. Mayor, Bo Peck. I am the president of the Utah Recycling Coalition. We've met with our board. We do have some recommendations to present to you as far as the marketing media for what's accepted. So 2017, our board created a top 10 in the bin marketing program for a statewide initiative to show what top 10 items should be placed in the bin, also with what should not be placed in the bin. We really recommend that you adhere to that statewide standard. That's really going to help you guys as far as reaching out to all your visitors that come to town, because they're also coming to Arches, they're coming to other national parks, but they're going to also go see other places in Utah as well on their way here. So if the message is mixed, that becomes quite confusing for those visitors. Our concerns with the program, we don't like to see glass especially mixed in with the curbside mix. We know that our friends next door provide that service, but recyclers in Utah do not. It's detrimental to the value of the paper in the mix. We can't get all the glass out. It really hurts the industry. Please read up on it. There is a lot that's changing in the industry where a lot of these recyclers are reverting back. So recycling markets have been very troubled in the last year. Just be open-minded to what changes are in the market. Recycling is changing, and it's a good time now to get the program marketed the correct way so you don't have to revert and make changes as this process begins. So glass, styrofoam, coffee cups and stuff like that really should not be marketed to the public to help clean up the stream for everyone. And this helps benefits the recycler, Momentum Waste as well. This would give them additional markets to Salt Lake City instead of just marketing to Denver, Colorado. So it really helps everyone on a whole to have a plan B.
Thank you, Bo.
Thank you.
Terry, you're up. And David is next, Moorlander.
Hi, I'm Terry Marsh, and I'm not going to reiterate what a lot of people have already said. I am opposed to it being mandatory. I already recycle and have collection bins. I've recycled since I've moved to Moab. I think that people who want to recycle will, and people who don't, won't. And having a bin on your property, having to take it out to the street, most of us will not fill up one of those bins even in a month. So twice a month, you're not going to be using that. So I am proposing that we do make it optional because it can be a convenience for some people, and for them it might be the right answer And we will get some of this trash not into our normal flow of household trash. I did look at Grand Junction, just to let you know that they have an optional curbside recycling for a single family up to a fourplex. It costs $1.75 a month or $21 a year. That's a far cry from what you're asking the residents of Moab to pay.
Thank you. David? And David Olson on deck.
My name's David Norlander, and my grandfather used to recycle aluminum cans. My dad recycled aluminum cans. And I think that we can, I went over to Junction a while back and took a bunch of cans and was able to sell them for 40 some odd cents a pound. I also learned while I was over there that scrap metal is going at $85 a ton, and I was thinking it would be good if we could I would rather have a opt-in than an opt-out on this program. I think most people should. I mean, would rather that be the case, and I think everybody should receive a mailer perhaps and be able to send it back in if they want to opt into the recycle program. I think also that the hotels, they have all these rooms. They should be paying their fair share of the recycling. Each room should be considered as much as a resident's housing in this town. A lot of times your rooms might be vacant, but sometimes people go on vacation, they still get charged for the recycling or whatever. I don't think it should be that much, and I think that the hotel should be paying their fair share, considering they're making more than most of the money in this town anyways. That's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. David? And on deck is Charlotte.
Well, I had a whole list of things to say, but after that presentation, I like the options, and they seem fair, and especially that every other week option. I wrote a email to you all, and I guess I'm on the same page with everyone here, and I like what's going on, so thanks.
Thank you. Shar? And on deck is Nina Rose.
Thank you so much, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Charlotte Mates. I've been a citizen of Moab, Utah for 23 years, all total, and I attended a meeting a few weeks back, maybe almost a month ago, that was put on by Bill Barron, who had run for senator and congressman on the climate platform, and it was the carbon
Citizens Climate.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Lobby?
It was a Citizens Climate Lobby is what he presented for an hour, and it was supported by Ronnie and Kai Warner from the high school. Wayner, I'm sorry, I'm butchering these names. And basically, it was a 1-hour presentation to see who might be interested in this. They will be having a training on February 20th from 6 to 8:30 out of the ACT campground, and reservations just need to be made, but community, anyone interested in climate is welcome to attend. We will be holding a community event at the community center, the Grand County Community Center, and it will be for the entire community to come out. It will be called the Grand Green Ball, and it will be held on March 16th from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock in the evening. And part of that is so that people who are not able to drive at night or have other commitments can also attend and be part of it. It's going to be a fun event, and look for the signals because we're going to do a dot-to-dot, and I hope to bring the community together for some of these events. Climate affects us all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nina Rose. On deck is Del Keys.
Hello. I came tonight to thank Mike Duncan for
putting a hold on the recycle so people could have a voice. And I wanted to ask all of you that maybe in the future to realize sometimes we're not all on the same page, and we need to have a heads up of the issues a little more. Some of us aren't always right in the same page you are, and I really appreciated the extra time for the heads up. Thank you.
Thank you. Del? Kevin Walker on deck.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you folks. I support voluntary recycling as it has been. I've taken things to the recycle center ever since it opened, will continue to do so. I think many, many more people than what you suggested do that. I think I see people up there every time I go. I'm not there by myself. I do not support mandatory recycling or mandatory much anything, but particularly mandatory recycling right now. And thank you for giving people a chance to voice their feelings. I reference a letter that our former mayor, Carla Hancock, wrote into the Times-Independent last week. It was an excellent letter. And I think she's expressing the same views many of us are expressing tonight. Making it optional is probably the most important thing. Whether you choose to make it opt-in or opt-out, and probably the opt-in is best, make it very, very, very clear to people how they go about doing that. Let's not slip in and stick them with a charge that they're not expecting. And there are many people who maybe just don't quite understand. So I think getting the word out very clearly will be important. Do not increase these rates, please, as you have recently been suggested. Some residents are really hurt by this. Please avoid mandatory. Be sure that whatever we decide, we keep it either opt-in, opt-out, optional. Thank you to Monument for a good service they provide. And as someone else had also suggested, how do we address the visitors and how they handle these things? It needs to be clear to them too, or the hotels or the outfitters and that sort of thing. Really important that we support this recycle center. Let's get behind it. Give them our support. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank
Del.
you.
Kevin? Steph is next.
Hi, my name is Kevin Walker. I'm going to foolishly try to cover 4 topics in well under 2 minutes. First, thank you guys for all you do. Sitting through meetings like this for years on end, it's impressive, and you're our heroes. Second, Zachariah Levine enlisted me as his proxy. He's very sorry he can't be here, even though he said he would, and he wanted me to remind people about the Dark Skies Symposium on February 20th at the Grand Center, 5 to 7. I think maybe someone else mentioned that. The main thing I wanted to talk about is the temporary moratorium on hotels. I was a little bit surprised how few people have talked about that, but in hindsight, maybe not, because it's kind of a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you want to take a new look at hotels? And if you're going to contemplate a significant change in zoning, of course, you have to have a temporary moratorium while you do that. So I think it should be a very easy vote. A no vote would mean you think everything's great the way it is. I don't know many people who think that. And the tough votes will come in the future when you decide what the long-term policy should be. So I hope you will all vote for the temporary moratorium. I still have time? Yeah.
You still have a little more time.
Okay. And then finally, I'm not deeply involved in the recycling issue, but I did want to say something in favor of the opt-out as opposed to opt-in. I think the vast majority of people are people who would never come to a meeting like this, who don't have strong feelings about recycling, and if they just need a nudge to do it. So I think there's a lot of sort of low-hanging, non-recyclers who could become recyclers if they, with the opt-out program. So, most people are you're just going to have a lot greater participation, and I think the opt-out addresses the concerns of people here who don't want to pay if they don't have to. So, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Steph? Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up because...
I opt not to speak, but I decided to change my mind. Is that okay?
Sure, just take a seat. Okay. Tell us your name.
I'm Ken Robbins. I've lived here since 1973. I'm 90 years old. My recycling would affect my budget, my income, because most seniors are on a fixed income. They cannot take an increase in that. So I've seen the recycling go on. Waste Management in Grand Junction calls all that recycling to down in Mexico. It's recycled there and shipped overseas. When I only have maybe a 32-gallon can of stuff to recycle once a year, I'm getting hurt, and all of my senior buddies and people around the Grand Center, it affects us. So it needs to be some real good thought on it. Mandatory, I served in the service, and I didn't come up serving the service voluntarily. I enlisted. Why should I be put forth with something that's mandatory, taking away my freedom of choice? I do not approve of it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Steph? And blank. And next is Bob O'Brien.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steph Amborski. I've lived here for nearly 2 years, and so I'm new to this community, and I recognize that this conversation has been going on for several years before that, and that recently a lot of people have become energized about this, and while that is in some ways unfortunate, I think it's a really good time to continue to investigate our options further. So I think at the very least, going with opt-in through monument waste is the most important decision we could make, so that we could consider other options, such as investing more tangibly in the solid waste district, making sure that our recyclables are being shipped to domestic markets instead of shipping overseas. I have a lot of questions about what is happening at Alpine Altogether Recycling, the Denver MRF, for example, what percentage is being diverted to the landfill there, and what percentage is being shipped overseas specifically, and could we see different rates if we kept our recyclables locally and we're shipping to domestic markets from the recycling center. I think that it's also important for us to consider different options for trash sizes and costs for trash sizes to incentivize waste reduction on the front end, not just the $28 or $30 difference, but an even smaller trash can size for folks who truly generate very little waste. I would like to see that. And I think that there should just be more public conversations beyond city council meetings about this issue, because I think a lot of people in our community have creative solutions. I know the city council and Monument Waste have the best intentions for this community in their hearts, and I truly believe that, but I think that mandatory recycling is wrong right now, and it's premature, and a lot of people are super excited to be a part of this conversation, and I think it's prime time for us to launch a more public exploration of our options. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob? And next will be Kenneth Robbins.
Hi, I'm Bob O'Brien, and I'm on the Grand County Planning Commission, and I'm not, of course, speaking for the Grand County Planning Commission, but I do want to say I've worked a lot on this issue of housing, affordable housing, high density overlay for the county, and of course it's a terrific problem. I believe in the county it's something like 30% of the housing is non-primary residence for people. So it means we just have a lot of overnight housing. We have a lot of people who invest in housing to do, they don't live in it, but they rent it. It drives up prices of housing. So of course, the county has now decided to do their own moratorium. I think it's a great idea. Went to the Planning Commission meeting tonight, and of course you're told you've got 6 months. You better do something. So it's going to really, I think, focus the issue. and the city has this issue, and we don't have housing for residents of the city. So of course, I'm going to urge you to do this moratorium. It'll put pressure on you. It'll put pressure on your planning commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth? Does not wish to speak. My apologies. My apologies. Crystal. And Anna's up.
My name's Crystal White. Thank you for letting me come before you tonight. First, I'd like to let everyone know that on February 20th, as stated before, from 5 to 7, the Moab Dark Skies Working Group is having an open house on the lighting code, and we would love to have everybody come and join in the conversation. And then also, I wanted to speak on the last agenda item you have, which is the highway lights along 191, and wondering if the Moab Dark Skies Working Group could have a look at the suggestions from the consultants before decisions are made or advanced in any way, if that would be something that we could possibly do. So we're putting that request out. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anna, and this is the last form that I have, and so if anybody still would like to speak, now is the time. Otherwise, we will be moving on.
I have a quick question. In any of the plans for recycling, is commercial enterprises required to recycle, like mandatory recycling for them as well? Like within like today, you know, when you implement the agreement, are commercial enterprises going to have mandatory recycling?
Well, that's what we're here to decide tonight.
Okay. So this contract, or the one that any of them that are proposed, has no plan that I've seen to implement mandatory recycling for commercial enterprises at any point between now and 2014. This means that the financial responsibility falls entirely upon the shoulders of our residents. It leaves no guarantee that commercial enterprises will recycle in the next 5 years. By not having a recycling implementation schedule, this allows commercial enterprises ranging from locally owned businesses to international hotel chains to avoid adopting sustainable habits. Moab is considered Grand County's largest city and tourism hub. We see a majority of visitors, and whether they stay within our city limits or the counties, these visitors dine in our restaurants, go to our hotels, contribute to the amount of trash that our city produces. It is more likely that these visitors will make more trash and recycle less than the average person living in Moab. Visitors' access to recyclable materials and recycling receptacles is limited. If commercial enterprises are not required to recycle, the chance of these visitors encountering recycling receptacles is not likely. There's an opportunity to lay a foundation for future sustainable endeavors, but it starts with making a plan, and the first plan should hold commercial enterprises responsible for the amount of trash they produce and the amount of trash they should recycle. If recycling is mandatory for our community members, it should be mandatory for the businesses within our community. I am for mandatory recycling for all community members. That includes not only our residents, but the businesses within the same city limits as our residents. If our residents have to see a 50% increase in our trash bill, commercial enterprises need to also see a 50% increase in their trash bill. Another option, or better yet, hold the responsible party responsible and use mandatory increase for commercial enterprises to subsidize the additional recycling fee of our residents, which I think would take the financial burden off of their shoulders and keep the money within our community.
Thank you, Anna. That's all the form I have. So, oh, there's one more.
There's one more.
Oh, there is one more. Come on up. You're gonna hand me your form. Reference? Go for it. Okay.
Hello? Okay, just wanted to try that out real quick. My name is Jesse. I've lived in Moab for a few years now. Not as long as some that have spoke tonight, but I have loved the earth for the entire part of my life, so I think that's pretty relevant. The topics that we're talking on as far as sustainability goes are some very complex topics. a little bit about my background. I'm a plastics engineer, and I understand a little bit of the plastics processes. And I work across the country with sustainability as a sustainability coordinator with different events. And I've worked with a couple here in Moab. And I think something that's really important as everyone is coming to the table and listening about these sustainability topics, and a lot of people are energized about it. There are solutions. We're not stuck between a hard place and a rock. So it's really important that we focus on education, especially with our tourists coming in and things, educating people about the trees, the water, the soil, the pollution, the limitations that we face as a desert island, talking about the wildlife, and really letting people know what's going on. In events that we've required a mandatory education program or orientation for our volunteers and everyone coming through the gate, which has greatly reduced impact. I think moving forward with the recycling, there are other options. Obviously, the recycling center is one that has been discussed many times. We could pursue things like pick-and pools to allow parts to be removed from these areas and reused by the people who need them. Firewood is another good example of that. There's often large amounts of firewood that are being just tossed away that people are buying from other locations. For plastic recycling, thank you very much. There are many solutions, everyone.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. And Lee.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here and hearing all of our opinions. I am a very new resident to Moab. I'm a new community rebuilds intern, so I've only been here about 2 weeks. But I was not going to talk, but I wanted to bring up a couple points that I didn't hear discussed fully. It sounds like the motivation from what I've read for this mandatory recycling program is because of the carbon footprint goals that Moab has set for itself. And it sounds like y'all have backed yourselves into a corner a little bit. And it just seems to me like there's a little bit of, it seems like the problem is coming from the huge amount of people that stream through the city every year for tourism purposes. And it seems like the brunt of the solution is going to fall on the residents who generate a very small percentage of the overall waste. So I just wanted to encourage people to realize that if we're trying to address this larger problem, it's going to take a larger view. And additionally, I think that some other people have brought up good points about where recycling goes and the fact that a lot of it doesn't get recycled. And if it does get recycled, it's only after being trucked halfway across the world. And that recycling process is maybe, I would say at least worthy of more investigation to determine whether or not it would actually reduce our carbon footprint as a community, or if it would just export the problem and tack it onto someone else's carbon footprint, when really it does lie with us. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments? Rachel, any other forms? Anyone else to speak? Okay, thank you all. Take a minute here. Reorganize. Item 7, special events. We have nothing on the agenda for that. Item 8, old business. 8.1, resolution 7, 2019, authorizing the city manager to enter into a franchise agreement on behalf of the city of Moab with Monument Waste Incorporated for residential, municipal, and commercial solid waste and recycling collection and disposal. So here we are, ready to deliberate about this very topic. I think it's probably responsible for us to at least give each of the council members reflect and state where we are. So if that's all right with all of you, who would like to go first?
I will. So I've attended a couple of recycling meetings, and when we first were presented this contract, it's a lot of information to go through. But some of the things that I've looked at that have been addressed, we've heard from a lot of constituents that they aren't big trash producers, and so it has been reflected in this new contract, which thank you very much for doing that. There's other, I guess I'm wondering if we say, is there any tweaking that we can do still? Sure. Yes?
I mean, yes, but, you know, it's always, I mean, yes, I want to hear what we can do. It's, you know, rewriting the whole thing is probably not an option today, but there's somewhere on the spectrum where it makes sense to make modifications at the dais.
So some of the bigger issues that that I have, that as well as allowing people to produce less trash. I mean, we have to figure out what our goals are, and it seems like producing less waste is the ultimate goal, and having people realize that every single person produces trash and that there's a cost to that. And like our eldest member in the community who spoke tonight, I mean, he wouldn't fill up a 95-gallon recycle bin. Is it possible to offer another option of having like the recycling once a month?
So a couple things. One, the options that are put forward in this amended plan are a 95 or a 65.
Yep.
And
no, but only 95 for recycling.
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're saying recycling.
So recycling, you know, I mean, again, you want to encourage
what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Good behavior. You don't want it to be a cost burden, yet you would like to have people participate. There's concerns with single stream. We all know it's dirty, and the education piece, I know that we've been told that there's going to be somebody appointed to do 20 hours of work. We have over 2 million visitors who come to Moab, and they're going to use all of our city bins. And as soon as you dump a can of LaCroix or Pepsi into our recycling bin that has any form of liquid in it, it ruins all the paper that's in that bin. And the education piece is so important if we're going to try to have the cleanest, not just for us, but for the MRF and for Monument Waste, because they're going to get penalized when we have dirty trash. And so there's the concern that how are we really going to educate not just our residents, but everyone who comes to visit us? That's one thing. And then another point in the contract is that commercial rates are going up 14 to 65%, and that hasn't been discussed at all. And I know people were really upset that we weren't requiring mandatory commercial recycling. That's not what happened. We were told by Monument Waste that they were not ready to require mandatory commercial recycling because they need to meet with all of the commercial businesses to figure out what sort of system they needed, and they also aren't physically prepared to do the commercial side of things. Is that?
I would say it's fair to characterize this as it's a big step, no question, in terms of recycling generally, and the approach. And there's going to be things that we just aren't going to know exactly how they work until we get in there and get going and get doing it, you know. And I think what I have appreciated about what the service provider has been, how they've approached this with us is they've you know, Dan and company, they've said, look, we can be flexible here and we can adjust, and we can, if there's an opportunity to accelerate things like recycling participation by businesses, you know, they'll obviously would be all over it, and they'll work with us to make that work. I know they've had a number of businesses signing up for the service, but there are certainly going to be some out there for whom it's not practical from a space constraints and for other reasons. So yes, so in part the approach with regard to not proposing a requirement for commercial had to do with some logistical and practical constraints.
And I just would like to say that as a council, at least with the conversations I've had, we would never meant to make anything mandatory for a resident that we were not going to make mandatory for a commercial use. I mean, we would like to talk equity, and so I think that's where we've come to now with having an opt-out or an opt-in version. Yes, so I would like to offer more options, and it's, you know, it's interesting to see now that we're in this time right now. It's like just when you're about to move and you're like, oh, I got to go visit Arches and I got to go to my favorite restaurant. I mean, now people are going, oh crap, what are we going to do about our recycling center? And another point, our recycling center is not free, and we received so many emails from people to say keep the recycling center free, and it's not. And there's discussions with the solid waste district to take away some of the TRT funding and the mineral lease funding that has been given to the recycling center to operate. So these are all big discussions, and it is complex, but it's free because you get to go up there and go dump your stuff, but it isn't free, and that point needs to be illustrated. Somebody's paying for it.
Thanks, Karen, for sharing that, everything that you shared.
So I'd like to thank the council members that tabled this at our last meeting. I think there's been a lot of good dialogue and progress made on the contract. Specifically, I think there's been significant improvements to the trash rates. I applaud the work of city manager and Monument Waste in developing the pay-as-you-throw options. I think those address a significant concern that we've heard, that the cost, and we now have, depending on which version of this we pass, the opportunity for people to pay less than they have in recent memory for their trash service. So that is a significant improvement. And as was pointed out, the recycling center is not going away. If we pass this contract, we are increasing the diversity of options available to our residents for recycling, not decreasing them. Yeah. So I am prepared to offer a motion for the opt-out option when the council is ready to consider it.
I think it's important to note, I don't know, but just to remind us all that you serve on the special service district, the waste, what's the official name? Solid waste.
The Solid Waste Special Service District #1.
Thank you for being #1 in your service. And so you're pretty intimate with this issue as a council member.
Far too intimate.
Far too intimate. And are you the treasurer? Is this a rumor that I hear?
Yes.
Okay, so not only...
But being the treasurer as a board member is a lot different from being the treasurer as a full-time paid employee.
True.
Don't overstate my knowledge.
I just want to just recognize your contribution and your voice that you have, and the experience and history that you have in serving on that board is really critical in this dialogue. So thank you for that, Cameron.
First of all, thank you to staff for revising and revising and re-revising this to make us look a little bit better. Thank you for all showing up tonight. It says a lot about our community that you will take the time out of your Gold Island or whatever my husband's at home watching. I think it's important, like Karen said, that to understand that the recycle center isn't free. It costs our community in several ways. That doesn't mean that it's not a valuable part of our community. It's also important to note that we as a council are required to have a waste hauling contract. We are not required to offer recycling, but it was something that we as a council felt was important. And this is our first step in this vein. Does that mean everything is carved in granite and that it's perfect? Absolutely not. There's always room for improvement. There is always room for more conversation. I've been impressed with the creative comments that have come to us via email or just through conversations that I've had. I've also had some rather unpleasant conversations, and I would not advocate destroying or vandalizing Monument Waste bins just because you don't want to recycle. That's all I have.
Thanks for sharing, Tawny.
Well, first of all, a couple of data points for you. As Karen pointed out, it's something on the order of $200,000 a year in TRT sales tax subsidies that the Recycle Center enjoys. And in retrospect, trying to do this basically where the cost is essentially borne by the residents and the businesses is kind of a tough sell. Somebody commented on the $1 a month rates that are enjoyed by Grand Junction residents. Karen and Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Darren was here, he pointed out that effort enjoys a $500,000 a year subsidy. Mm-hmm. So it's not free there either, by a long shot. So that. Okay, so just feedback for you guys. We've gotten more, my wife said today, she says, Mike, why are you spending so much time reading letters, even more than Pat? And it's because we've had a lot of letters, and they all say basically what you guys have heard here tonight. And people don't like mandatory. They want to make sure businesses share their side of the burden, and people want to keep the Recycle Center open. That's in county's hands, by the way. You guys know that we don't really have any direct influence on it, although we can advocate one way or the other. So to kind of summarize where I'm at, it's I think we're headed more or less the same place. The situation with single stream recycling is not, as I will put it, is not so weak that it's not worth a try. Okay, and at the same time, it's not so strong that it deserves subsidies of some sort. So I'm kind of happy with options. We'll talk about in versus out in just a moment. And Karen brought up a good point. I don't think anybody's seen this because I haven't gotten any letters from business owners going, what is this with in some cases dramatically increased waste rates? And even if a business elects not to recycle, they're still going to pay these in some cases, particularly with 2-yard containers. I don't know how common those are. David, maybe you know.
Very common.
Mm-hmm.
The most common.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Karen is correct. If you look at the charts that are on the city's website, it's anywhere from a 21 to a 65% increase. And it's a little fuzzy, all right, because there's some confusion about what constitutes current rates because the city doesn't directly get involved presently with commercial waste rates. That's negotiated between Monument and the customers. But David tells me that the increase in rates is in part due to unavoidable cost fees. Those are legitimate in my mind. But the notion of using some of that money, some of that increase in rates to subsidize recycling, if there were a moral imperative for it, in other words, if I thought recycling was so important that we were all going to die tomorrow, I would vote to subsidize it in a flash. But I don't think single source recycling is there yet with the present weak market in the world and in the country. It's also a difficult idea to sell because we're out here in the boonies. And if we were lived in a big urban area where they're running out of landfill space, that'd be another issue, but we're not. So having said all that, I'm willing to entertain a motion of what I suspect to be much like what Kalen is going to offer, basically a residential opt-out and a commercial opt-in the first year to give Monument a chance to do their thing and opt-out afterwards. And I want to emphasize, guys, that probably the way the opt-out will work is at the time we pass the ordinance, there'll be some, Joel suggested this. Joel, you want to explain to them how this might work?
Or you could just
use
use
Ronnie's
this
here
guy.
if you like.
I don't know. I'll just sit in Ronnie's spot. So,
This is Joel. He's our assistant city manager.
so I don't want this to be taken as this is set in stone and this is how we would do it. There's several ways you could do it, but the ideas that we've kind of kicked around is we would adopt a code similar to the trash code that would outline recycling. In another city I've been a part of where we've done this, there was a 90-day window where a letter was sent to all residents where they were given notice that the 90 days, there was a hard deadline. That letter came with an attachment that could be cut off, sent back in, that itself, or we also set up an email that you could just respond to that email directly, and it was an email set up at the city, and that would opt you out as well. Once that period was over and the implementation of the program began, there was a once-a-year period. In that city, it was June 1 to June 30, where you could opt out. The reason for having people in the program is it allows for there enough funds to be collected in order to cover the cost of providing the service, and allowing only the one-time service opt-out is that saves cost as well, because the provider, in this case Monument, is not constantly picking up cans, dropping off cans, and there's not that added overhead of people opting in, opting out, constantly changing the form. So that's one way it could work. That's the most common way that they are used, is to allow for like a 90-day window, people to opt out. Once that number's set, Monument can then start delivering cans based off that list that we've created off who's who's remained in the program, and then Monument can start providing the service. And then, like I said, once a year from the start period, there would be a opt-out window. Most cities that provide an opt-out, they will let you opt out in the middle, but there's a penalty. Usually the penalty for opting out to pick up the can, the cost of picking up the can when they would charge you to pick up the can would outweigh the cost of just staying in the program for the remainder of what would be the fiscal year of that year. So that's one way it could that it could look.
Thanks for sharing that, Joel, and thanks for sharing your experience in doing it in another community. Is there more that you wanted to share? Because if you're
yeah, so with the possible amendment of rectifying what rates are being used, waste rates, particularly commercial waste rates being used to subsidize recycling, I think we're all on the same board. I'm guessing. We'll find out.
So could I just say, so we're ready to implement if we say yes to this contract one way or the other, that commercial rates are going to go up in 2 weeks, and I'm just really concerned that businesses have not been made I mean, your insurance goes up, your insurance provider tells you, hey, your insurance rates are going up January 1st, and you kind of get a heads up. I'm just, is it our responsibility to give a heads up, or is this just going to be another bill, and we're dealing with church members coming up and going, oh my God, you know, look at, well, they wouldn't say,
They
well,
wouldn't
they would.
say that.
Sorry. They wouldn't. Oh my goodness. Look at my, sorry.
Oh my heck.
I believe it's oh my heck.
Oh my heck.
Yeah,
Yes, oh my, yes, sorry. I apologize. I didn't use a profanity. Yeah, well.
On the record
yes,
now.
Yes, I know. So, yes, but anyways, whose responsibility is it to get that information out? And then a second thing is, I was hoping to ask Dan if the bins that the city has now, are you taking those back, or are those going to be able to be used again? Because if we're talking about waste, like I'm curious what's happening there.
Well, I'll say the answer is yes. He's buying the bins back at a depreciated rate, but he is buying the bins back for use or recycling to be reprocessed. Does that make sense?
To go to a.
They would not come back to the city.
We cannot use those.
Right, Dan? Those, if I remember right, can you just really quickly speak up into the mic on it? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It's probably worth it to introduce. So this is Dan, the owner of Monument Waste. Thanks for coming up to speak.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm trying to avoid this,
I recognize that you were not, you did not give a comment form to be a citizen to be heard.
And Mayor, if I may
Yeah.
just interject, this is not where you negotiate with the service provider.
Right.
Okay, just to be clear, questions and clarifications are great, but it'd be super inappropriate to be negotiating with the service provider right here. Thank you all.
Okay. Yes, we're buying back the current green cards. So our plan is not to trash those.
Hey, Dan, speak a little more into the mic.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
So we're going to buy the carts back, and we're going to continue to use those. So as they deteriorate or become unusable, then our obligation is to replace them with new carts. So a lot of the carts have been replaced at a rate of like 10% a year for the last 10 years. So some of them are still new. Some of them are very experienced and need to go away. So we'll change them out as needed. So the recycle side of the house will be all new carts, and the old ones will kind of get reused through the process.
Gotcha. Okay. Just trying to figure out the waste stream.
It's a great question.
So do your guys just determine that as they look at our pathetic carts that they pick up and say,
Hey, I have a nice one.
I have a nice one too.
My neighbor's
I
been
haven't washed
repairing
mine out.
his for a few years now.
We get calls every day. So
I'm sure.
really, I mean, we're average 5 to 10 a day, repair or replacement. So they get to a point when the bottoms are out and they leak so bad, then we trash them at that point. So, and when David and I talked, you know, to change everything out at once would be an immense task, plus an expense to get rid of 3,000 carts. It's crazy. So we're going to do it over time. So you'll see new carts in the system, relieving the old ones.
Dan, if members of the community would like to be in touch to get more information, phone number and email?
Email is dan@monumentwaste.com. Phone number is 435-259-6314. And come by our office anytime. The door is always open.
And where's your office?
2295 South Highway 191 at the transfer station.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to share something I was talking about earlier today. I had the chance to meet you and talk to you, and that was really nice. And I shared something to you that I'm going to share right now, that there is a three-legged stool that works well in process, and that is government, private sector, and nonprofit. That three-legged stool provides the best service, the most comprehensive service, whether we're talking waste hauling or otherwise. And I just want to give a nod to Dan and thank you, and thank you, Monument Waste, for responding to the RFP that was put out and working very closely with the city as we've been listening to residents and trying to craft the scope of what we're going to do. And I encourage the participation. The stool cannot stand without the nonprofit leg, and in that is going to be the work that has been done by Solutions and the utilization of the center, because we've got lots of stuff to talk about beyond even what's on the list, like our compost and light bulbs and things like that. So concrete, construction waste. So I just want to encourage us, that this is a conversation, and I want to encourage us to dig deeper and make sure that we recognize the three-legged stool. And recognize, like what Tani said, we're taking steps to figure it out. And I'm really grateful to the citizens, to all of you that have made comments. I'm especially grateful and always continue to be grateful to those that are forward-thinking and not hurtful or threatening to council members. Because certainly none of us intend any harm to anybody in the community, including economic stress. That's not what we're here to do. And it's always important to be grateful and point positive, but really be grateful to those that, those comments that help inform decision rather than make us feel really bad. So thank you for those. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve Resolution 07-2019 with the following changes to the proposed franchise agreement. Under residential number of polycarts, the third bullet shall read in its entirety, additional trash or recycling polycarts may be located as a residence on a case-by-case basis. Requests for ongoing additional or reduced polycarts at a residence shall be processed during the months of February and October only, except that request will be also processed in the 2 months subsequent to the commencement of this agreement. The recycling polycart number shall be permitted to be reduced to 0, and direct staff to develop and implement a communication plan by the usual channels and utility bills in English and Spanish to thoroughly inform city utility customers of the new range of service options, pricing, and the option to opt out of recycling entirely.
Thank you, Kaylin. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Tawny.
So,
do you want to plain English that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, the plain English of that is that, so previously the language of that third bullet only allowed for requests for ongoing additional polycarts. This allows, so for residences that may have more than one polycart of either type, they can be reduced. So if someone went up to 2 trash polycarts, they can go down to 1, that's explicit. And if they have 1 recycling polycart, they can go down to 0. And they can do that twice a year. Mm-hmm. So that's more flexibility than what was previously discussed about what another city does. And per the existing contract, for the 2-month period prior to beginning the agreement, anyone can opt out of the recycling. And then the last part of that was directing staff to be really clear with all the customers about that they can, if they are generating less trash, there's options to have a smaller cans or less frequent pickup and save some money. As well as there's recycling coming. If you don't want it, let us know.
Thank you, Kaylin. Discussion?
Yeah. So, Kaylin, let me make sure I understand. So you caught me by surprise a little bit. So you're basically suggesting an amendment that allows a wider variety of container sizes?
No, I am not changing the container sizes or the frequency of pickup that are spelled out in the contract before us. I'm merely directing staff to be very explicit with our customers about what those are.
That's it.
And making recycling opt out.
Well, okay. So are you, okay, just to clarify then, are you talking about what presented to us as option 3?
Yes, this is option 3.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarifying question.
Yeah. And I was providing specific language to amend the contract as opposed to general direction and intent for staff.
So it's like option 3, but like plus education.
On steroids.
Yes. And I did run that language by David this afternoon for if he thought it was clear and direct regarding the intent.
Okay, so
as long as it's clear and direct for David.
And
I'm not sure what to make of that.
I mean, that was a lot. I'm like trying to work myself through
because
that,
it's a very detailed motion.
Well, it's a complicated issue.
Well, it's actually changing the language in the contract the least that I could and accomplish the intent of option 3.
Yeah.
So, but you have to read it in the context of the contract to fully understand it.
I did read the contract and I still, okay. Like, yes. Okay, so can I just say, so we're offering 95 and 65 gallon polycarts for trash. We are offering a 95 gallon for recycling.
Correct.
We are offering every other week pickup and also weekly pickup.
Let me be clear about that. For recycling, it will only be every other week. For trash, residents will have the option, this is not about commercial at all, but for residents, they would have the option, the default would be every week, the way it is today.
Yep.
But you would have the option to go to every other week service. So as Kaylin had put it at one point, it really gives you essentially sort of 4 volume options for pickup each month, right?
Yes.
You've got small every week, large every week, small every other week, large every other week.
Okay.
So,
And the motion also, for those that want to opt out and get the smaller 65-gallon bill, currently you're paying $17. With this motion, you are now paying $12.
Saving $5.
If you want the smaller cart.
If you want the smaller cart, biweekly pickup, and opt out of recycling, you're about to pay less. However, if you would like to keep the same trash cart and the weekly pickup, that is $18 plus the recycling, which is $12. Is that right? Am I reading that right? $18 if you want to keep it the way it is. $17 right now. $18 to keep it the way it is. Add recycling. Green Solutions has been $12 a month. Your recycling will now be at the 65-gallon, or sorry, at the 95-gallon every other week. $12 a month. You will net neutral. So with this motion. So what this accommodates is essentially the hopes of being responsive to the economic difference, the income levels, the use levels, and grow with the economy, or get a feedback loop with the economy, how to continue with recycling. I think that's the way I interpret your motion.
Well, the last bit was extra, but yes, I agree.
The what?
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I may, I got another question or two for you. So you threw me for a loop, buddy. I got to tell you, because I mean, this kind of standard stuff here, if any idiot can read this stuff and understand what we mean. But so let me ask you this categorical question: is there anything in what you're proposing that fails to, for example, the standard option 3 says an opt-out approach for commercial recycling service by, I would say, 1 year from now, for example. Yeah, that's what I would add. So does your motion specify that that's what we're including?
What does your motion say for commercial?
Yeah.
It did not amend the contract as presented in regards to commercial, which, as I read it, is an opt-in, period.
Correct. I would like to do that. Because I personally would like to do opt-in for commercial the first year and opt-out afterwards.
Okay, yeah, there's a motion that's been made and seconded.
Yeah.
Okay.
So probably the
well, so I'm just curious, like, from the commercial, if anyone else is having those feelings.
Of it, opt-in? I mean, it seems like there was the same. It was option 3 that was presented to us.
Yeah.
That commercial is opt-in.
Commercial
at this
is
point.
opt-in.
Yes, but I would like the motion to read that we're going to move commercial to opt out after a year.
Oh, I see.
Oh.
So I want to see where this one goes
Well,
and then go.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to be really clear so that we understand what Mike is implying.
And there's another reason, Kaylin. You say nothing about the commercial waste contract concerns that Karen and I have raised, and a motion I might make might attempt to address that.
Well, I think that we're trying to understand capacity and how we do commercial. So, of the comments that I've heard, we're giving the option to opt out for residential, and commercial can continue to opt in, which we hear that you know, even before our action tonight, commercial is opting in. Just want to throw that out, that's what's happening right now, and that I think I support the motion that's on the table in dealing with the commercial as it is. That's what I would just have to say about that.
Well, may I propose an amendment then to add additional?
I'd like to see how, I think I'd first call for a vote before we.
Just to be clear, and I'm sorry, Mayor, I don't
No worries. Yep.
Our rules of procedure do permit an amended motion.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a motion and a second. If there is an amended motion that is seconded, that is voted on first with the original voted on second, just so we're clear about what our rules say.
And I can entertain an amendment if you'd like to make that.
Yeah, I move then to amend the contract language to require an opt-out approach for commercial recycling after the first year, and further to direct staff to document for us the proposed commercial waste costs that are assigned to actual costs as opposed to subsidies towards recycling.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, let's discuss this. So essentially, you would like to make commercial mandatory for the first year. That's the way I
No.
Mandatory after.
No, not mandatory.
Oh, no,
opt out afterwards.
So what would it be for this first year?
Opt in. Opt in for yeah.
So it's just saying in a year it would be opt out?
Yeah, so then you're gonna have, so businesses are gonna have to actually make the effort to get out of their, just like we're doing to the residentials right now. That it would be the same scenario in a year to businesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's just opt out. It's opt out in a year.
Correct.
Okay.
So just to say again, we're gonna make it opt out for.
It's voluntary this year and opt out next year for commercial.
Yep.
Okay.
With one further,
I thought you were. I apologize because I thought you were implying that it would be mandatory.
No.
Okay, got it. Okay. Okay. So, shall we vote?
Can I get clarification on that motion in its entirety?
I don't understand it.
I
So
don't
let me
either.
just be clear. And it's late and I'm kind of dumb, but so commercial pickups would be, or service would be voluntary, and there would be an opt-out after the first year, and you would direct staff to document the proposed commercial costs associated with recycling?
Associated with waste pickup. That are intended to subsidize the cost of recycling service.
So essentially you're asking staff to document what the overall cost picture is.
Yeah,
to see
what I'm driving at, which you guys may or may not agree with me, all right? I'm not trying to insist that we have to. But what I see is that the residential trash pickup fees remain unchanged.
Mm-hmm.
However, on the commercial side, they're asking for a substantial increase.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ask why the increase, which I didn't expect, in other words, I'd like to have the commercial folks on the same footing as residential. If there's not going to be, if you're not asking residential's waste services to subsidize their recycling services, I think we should not do that for commercial as well. So when I saw increased cost for commercial trash services, I'm wondering why. What staff has told me is that some of those costs are, he thinks, related to, for the purpose of recycling, for the purpose of subsidizing recycle costs to businesses. Other parts of it may be related to more ordinary business expenses like tipping fees and labor increases and that sort of thing, and those are fine. But I would like to excise from commercial trash rates those costs that are associated with commercial recycle services. In other words, I don't want commercial trash rates to have to subsidize commercial recycle rates. I would like those recycle prices to stand on their own without having to be subsidized from another source.
Okay. At this point, if the amended motion is seconded, we could go ahead and, okay, so we could go ahead and vote on that and then go back to the first, correct?
Depending on what the action is on
the action. Do you have the clarity? Does everyone have the clarity on this?
No.
Okay.
I don't have clarity on it, and I feel like the city, we don't charge equal amounts for water. We have set our water rates to incentivize conservation, which we can do. So I feel like I don't agree with the intent of this. I think that trash rates can be adjusted to better match regional averages and as well as meet our own goals. So I can't support it.
Okay.
Both from not understanding it entirely and I don't think I agree with the intent.
Yeah, okay.
May I ask Chris one more question? Maybe I should break this into two separate amendments then?
Well,
you've got, I mean, point of order here, it gets impossible to understand what you're actually deciding. So you've got, for purposes of discussion here, you've got your motion, which has been made and seconded. I think maybe the best and clearest way would be to vote on that.
Yes,
and then our procedure says, depending on the outcome, we go back to the other one.
So let's call for, I'll call for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. So back to the original motion. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Woo! I would like to just give us 1 minute because I'm sure most of you would like to leave, unless you're here to for some more fun.
We do have a boundary line adjustment coming up.
What's that?
We have a boundary line adjustment.
We have a boundary line adjustment coming up. I'm going to get some water.
Oh.
And then we'll just 1 minute break. 1 minute.
That leaves commercial.
Substitute a motion to amend your motion.
It's opt-in.
I'm going to substitute a council member to amend my motion.
Quit amending my motion, man.
All right, well, that was a journey.
leave and have your, oh, thank you, Rachel. There's my microphone. If you are in the chambers and you're having conversation, please take it, not out in the hall, but out and down and around the corner in the hall, toward the front doors. Thank you to the Times Independent reporter for attempting to move people out of the hallway. Our chief is out there too. Get him, get him. I don't mean to seem inhospitable. Unfortunately, there's no tea. And no tea like we're not serving tea. Okay, moving right along. We are at 8.2. An update on Walnut Lane Housing Initiative. Unfortunately, Tracy, our housing director or special projects director, is home with the flu. David, you have a brief update for us regarding Walnut Lane?
Yes, I do. And it's something that I've been wanting to talk about today. And yes, so yeah, unfortunately Tracy's out, but he passed on just a few points. A big one is that he's been working on a preliminary draft of an RFP for architecture and engineering services for the redevelopment of the property. We'll bring that to you and have you all review that before we go too much further. But we'd like to get that out on the street here in the next probably month and a half. So that's a biggie. As you probably know, a bunch of the trailer homes that are on the property are not great shape, and we're working on some logistics around asbestos testing and probably removing some of that as they become vacant, so that we can help with the transition for the new development at some point. Our property management company does manage the property on our behalf. They've been doing so since December, but both Tracy and certainly Chantel and Carrie in the treasurer's office interface with a lot of the residents, and it's been generally very positive, and everybody seems to be working well to manage the property. We have, as you can imagine, with that kind of property, had some health and safety concerns with various trailers, and we've been working through getting those resolved as the property owner. And then we've had current residents are paying rent. We've only had a few situations where we've had no pays. People have been on payment plans. A lot of these are continuations of what's been happening prior to the city being the owner. And then that's really about it. Are there particular questions about the Walnut Lane project at this point?
So this RFP is going to go out, and it is going to address not only the transitional, but then also the architectural that we have to look forward to, correct?
Exactly.
Thank you for this update.
Sure.
Does the council have any questions about where we are with Walnut Lane? Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Moving on to new business 9.1, the confirmation of reappointment of Kaya Marenfield to the Moab City Planning and Zoning Commission. She was asked to serve, but she took a vacated position, and so while she's only been with the commission for under a year, we are I would like to appoint her to continue her service on the Planning Commission. I don't see her here, but I do have a certificate for her. And I would like to entertain a motion to confirm the appointment.
So moved.
Thank you, Tawny. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Passes 4-0. Next item on the agenda, 9.2, Proposed Resolution 13, 2019, confirming the appointment of Summer Johnson as the city recorder. I don't have a certificate, but I do have a statement that I am happy to appoint Summer Johnson as the city recorder. I will miss you in the planning department, but I'm glad to have the consistency and I know that you've been with the city for a very long time, and this is what you want. And so I'm grateful for you to have put your intent out there so that we could say thank you. And I'd like to offer you put you forward with an appointment. So is there a motion?
I move. May I?
Yeah.
I move to approve Resolution 13, 2019, confirming the appointment of Summer Johnson as the city recorder and authorizing the city manager to execute an employment agreement between the city of Moab and Summer Johnson.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tawny. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. The effective date of that is March 11th, or March 12th. Oh, they're right behind you. They're there, so.
Good thing there's video.
Hey, Summer, would you
Congratulations, Mom.
say when you started with the city?
I started April 10th, 2000.
And she was a receptionist, right?
I started in the
For the record.
administrative secretary position. Wow. Thank you for your service to the city. It's a great organization. Thanks. Okay. Moving right along. 9.3, Ordinance 2019-6, enacting a temporary land use regulation prohibiting for a period of 180 days the development of new nightly rental uses, including hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, and other overnight accommodations pending completion of revisions to city ordinances and zoning districts where nightly rentals are allowed. Chris, city attorney, would you take a moment just to orient all of us with what we're about to enact?
Yeah, assuming you do.
Assuming we do.
The ordinance is a temporary moratorium enacted under the authority granted to municipalities under Utah law to put a temporary break on new development to allow a period of time up to 6 months for the purpose of allowing the city or the affected municipality to study or enact new ordinance or regulations. The ordinance, as directed or as the direction was given to staff, will essentially put a hold on new overnight lodging accommodations within the city. It'll exempt existing developments, exempt those developments that have already submitted complete applications and paid their fees and which are already in process. And also
Completed applications to include, like, they would have had to, like, a complete site plan.
That's right. So for example, if an existing development application has already submitted a complete application that's under review by staff, that would be exempt from the ambit of this ordinance if adopted. There are also exemptions for some of the existing or for existing uses, obviously will not be affected, but also for those nightly rental uses that are in the C1 and C2 zoning districts where the only action that would be contemplated by the city would be the issuance of the building license. So for example, if you have an existing, business license, I'm sorry, thank you for the correction. So there are some cases where properties are already zoned for overnight lodging uses. They don't require substantial land use review. All they require is a business license for the proponent. So those are the major exemptions. But the impetus is really for the community to look at its future land use planning, particularly in those commercial zoning districts where lodging uses are allowed, to see what mix of uses would be appropriate, and essentially the direction would be to staff to look at future code revisions during that 6-month period and come back to you with additional recommendations.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt ordinance 2019-06, enacting a temporary land use regulation prohibiting for a period of 180 days the development of new nightly rental uses, including hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, and other overnight accommodations, pending completion of revisions to city ordinances in zoning districts where nightly rentals are allowed.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
I will second. I will second.
I will take Kalen's. I think he was first.
Okay.
Let's have discussion. I would just say that this is a fire under our rocket to make us shoot off into the future land use planning horizon. I am excited for this fire. This is something that I know that several of us, if not all of us, ran as platform to figure out. So I just want to also echo Kalen's caution that he has shared with me about wanting to be sure that we are moving forward and right on top of this, because we've only got 6 months. And it was also, shared at the retreat with all of us as well. So we've got 6 months, and we found with our last temporary moment that we found ourselves right at the very end. So we really need to be on top of this, all of us.
I'd just also like to add that I'm looking forward to working with the county with a shared vision of what it is that our valley is going to be when we grow up.
Yeah,
so
at least respect to future land use.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Mayor, if I may ask staff and Chris, what do you expect will be on our agenda? What's the process?
Oh, well, first off, that's up to the council. I mean, we're talking about new policy initiatives. The direction that was given to staff was as I understood it, council wants to look at what lodging uses would look like in the zones where lodging and overnight accommodations are allowed, what changes in terms of the mix of uses would be appropriate. And really, I mean, so these are pure policy-making matters. And I will tell you that what's very important to staff is that the council gives some direction about what kind of changes it wants to see in those zoning districts. So it's wide open, and David may.
Well, the only thing I'd add is what we discussed at the retreat was if this was to happen tonight, that we would essentially recalibrate the future land use map process that the city had already engaged a consultant to start doing, and have that addressed specifically as part of what they're doing, the provisions in the moratorium. So our plan, I think, we're still finalizing it, but our plan is to have that consulting firm do a workshop with you in 2 weeks.
Oh, really? So pretty soon. That's good.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to ask this council to be on top of it. So we're talking policy. We need to, not delay forward momentum by not making hard choices. So we're going to have to make some serious choices as we move this process forward. So we need to be ready to do that, and also have additional meetings to be able to meet with the consultants and do this. So I think this council is committed to do that, right?
Yeah.
To get it done. And we're going to rely heavily on the work of the consultants, the consultant that we're contracting with to do it, which is Landmark.
I think it's really important that somehow we communicate to the public that this is not an indefinite moratorium. We've had a few letters that said that it should go on until we received certain reports, certain different kinds of reports, and we're capped at 180 days. And we can't enact a new one just to extend it. So I think it's really important that we communicate that to the public and that state code that ties our hands, is that correct?
That's right. So you're limited to a 6-month duration, and it's not a lot of time.
Well, and for those that have, had concerns about water use, it's important to note that we were expecting data from USGS this past fall. It's going to be rolling out, do we know?
The spring is what I was told.
In the spring, and so that's going to have implications on how we decide to move forward as well, right?
Yeah. So, David, if I may, who's supervising the contract with Ken Combe, the consultant that we hired? He also is preparing a water budget estimate, and I have not heard from him. And his report, that part of the report was supposed to be in by now as well.
That's city engineers over that contract, and I'll have to get back to you as to when we're expecting a report.
Yeah, because I'd love to hear.
Sure.
Okay.
And I just want to add one more thing. So there was a lot of excitement around the C2 zone. And the reason why there was so much excitement is because it was mixed use. Because that's our one zone that really has like some mixed use potential. And so I'm excited to look at, do a deeper dive into what mixed use looks like within our zones.
So I'd just like to add that this ordinance is actually a result of the overwhelming success of the tourism and lodging industry. And like it or not, this is the industry that has, in the time that I've been in Moab, we've gone from a main street that was run down with boarded up businesses to a really vibrant economy, and one that allows us this organization to expand its services while remaining one of the few cities in Utah without a property tax.
Yep.
But we're a victim of our own success, and I really think we need a pause to complete some much needed work to address broader community development concerns. And this ordinance spells out multiple parts of our general plan that point to economic diversification and community development, which are hard to achieve when we're being overdeveloped with lodging. And so I think this is an important break. And the Housing and Economic Nexus Study, which was thorough, it established that there is a nexus between new lodging development and the reduced supply of affordable housing. So I really believe there is a compelling countervailing public interest to assure that lodging uses are developed in a manner that complements the other needs of the city and its residents, and that this ordinance is necessary to assure that the city can promptly develop ordinances and policies to achieve those ends.
Well put. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. 9-4, proposed resolution 12, 2019, approving a boundary line adjustment for lots 1 and 2 of the Secret Cove subdivision. I'm not going to call Summer up for these because unless we need her to answer any questions, unless this council would like that. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt resolution 12-2019, approving the Smith-Mac boundary line adjustment.
I'll second. Thank you, Kaylin. Thank you, Tani. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. 9-5, proposed settlement agreement between the City of Moab and Roger Knight Construction. Again, I'll not call Summer up. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the general lease and settlement agreement by and between the City of Moab and Knight Brothers Construction Company. Do I need to give an amount or just reference it?
As submitted.
As submitted.
Thank you, Kaylin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. Any discussion?
Be glad to have this in the rearview mirror.
Yes. Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. 9-6, discussion regarding US 191, street lighting evaluation and recommendations. Chuck, our city engineer, I do not see, but he did inform me that there would be a guest to make a presentation tonight, but I also do not see that guest. Yes.
I met with Chuck and the guests prior to our meeting, and they said they would be watching on the live stream, and then so as to time their interest dramatically.
Oh,
Probably moved through those last little
we
quicker than
moved
they
through the last two. Let us, approval of the bills against the city of Moab? While we wait, see what happens. I'm just gonna.
I neglected to total up the check registers, and I just sent Rachel an email asking for that.
Oh, well, I just, while Rachel's pulling that up, I want to thank Kaylin for taking on the task of reviewing the bills against the city. I want to thank Karen for her work for this past year in reviewing the bills against the city. And I'm grateful that Kaylin did take the time last week and this week to sit down and review said bills, and just needs the total to be able to approve bills.
Show you where they are.
I think that's all the stalling I've got.
Them, but I wasn't sure what.
And that's all the action that I can do while we wait either for Chuck or who.
Yeah, maybe. Thanks.
Yeah.
Texted him.
Check the lounge.
Okay.
We don't have a lounge.
Not yet.
Oh, good. Well, then you are.
Almost there.
Nice work.
Yeah.
Let's see who's
Well done.
first, the total or the engineer. No worries. We were fast going because it's 9:50.
And then it'll be
I do want to remind you that we do have
here.
still business after this item on the agenda.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
Thank you. I still need a little hand holding.
That's all good.
okay. Are you with Chuck?
Rachel's got the
Come on up.
total.
You have it?
Please grab a chair and come sit next to Chuck. Thank you. I hear you've driven over from Boulder to be part at.
Yeah, we have. My coworker, she's in the restaurant right now. We drove over this morning. Yeah.
How was the drive?
Awesome. Super mellow.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's nice doing it with no traffic, giving us ourselves enough time to not be in a hurry. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you want to, while they're getting set up, approve the?
Yes.
Okay.
I move
Just
to,
one moment.
I move to approve the bills against the city of Moab again in the amount of $1,233,805.64.
Thank you, Kaylin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you, Tawny. Any discussion items? Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. We just did item number 10 while we were waiting. So now we're back to you, 9-6, for those watching or participating. 9-6, the discussion regarding North US 199 street lighting evaluation and recommendations. Can we start with an introduction? Thank you.
Yes, this is Riley Rose and Annie.
Kuchkovsky.
From
Oh, I'm sorry, and please do talk in the microphone for the...
From Clanton and Associates. They're a street lighting consulting firm. And they've done a study for us in response to a request from UDOT on the Highway 191 road widening project. And what we wanted to do tonight was present...
I'm going to have you take the microphone, just put it on the other side. There you
Yeah,
go.
I wanted to
Thanks, Chuck.
present the results of their study to you tonight. Not asking for any action tonight, just want to share the information, largely in part because originally UDOT had wanted some decisions soon regarding street lighting, but in effect they've backed off and decided to, they'll put in on their dime some conduit and junction boxes so that if in the future we want to add some street lights, because they won't add them, we'll have the opportunity to do so with less costs. So.
Yeah. So we've got it looks like a slideshow presentation. So we can dim the lights, but it's been a bit of an exciting and emotional night for us as a council. So I'm actually looking forward to just relaxing, having you take us through some presentation. And thank you for driving to Moab to do this.
So,
I wish.
Chuck, if I may, before you guys get started, the pedestals and posts and conduits and all that, another subject that's come up in front of us is smart electronics, cell phone, this and that, you know, smart cars, driverless cars, blah, 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 that kind of thing. The infrastructure that you're talking about putting in, would that, if we ever wanted to add that in later on, would that be accommodated as well?
Yes, sir. In fact, we're going to talk about a little bit of that tonight in this presentation.
Yeah, and maybe we can hold our questions until
Absolutely.
the end of the
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, so that's the perfect segue in. As Chuck said, we're Clanton and Associates. We're lighting designers out of Boulder, Colorado. I'm one of the project managers, and Riley has been the designer who has been working with, well, this entire street. So he'll be guiding the presentation. But to let you guys know a little bit about our company, our CEO, Nancy Clanton, worked on the International Dark Skies Association board for several years. As lighting designers, we're actually involved in writing a lot of the criteria used throughout the nation. We're also very focused on making sure that the appropriate amount of light is put into the appropriate area, but not overlighting anything. One of our main ideals is, you know, lighting areas to moonlight levels to make sure that everything is appropriately and adequately lighted without overlighting. So I'm gonna let Riley take this away and we'll answer any questions or comments you guys have at the end.
Awesome, thank you guys for having us. So the scope of this project is from approximately the Colorado River in Utah 128 down to 400 north. So the whole north side of the road as you come into town. To begin this, we want to talk about how we measure light. There are two prominent metrics that we use. There's illuminance and luminance. I know they're very similar. Illuminance is the amount of light that falls onto a surface. So although the same amount of light is falling on this finished desk as well as this paper here, the desk is going to appear brighter because there's going to be more reflection coming off of it. That reflected light that we perceive is called luminance or brightness. And that's what we measure roadway lighting in, is the amount of luminance on the roadway. So it's just an introduction on how we measure light and how we'll talk about it in this presentation. Another thing that we talk about a lot in roadway lighting is vertical illuminance, or the amount of light falling on a pedestrian in a crosswalk. This is important to identify pedestrians as they're crossing the street, if it's at an intersection or if it's in a mid-block crosswalk, signalized with a hawk or anything. It helps drivers identify what's in the roadway, especially important if it is a pedestrian. Looking at the existing lighting along the scope of work out here, along the north side of the road, the lighting is arranged all along the east side of the road, single-sided, and it's all overhead fed with these wooden poles. Now there's a large gap where there's no lighting from 500 west to just before Mavita. And then as we get past that, there is a staggered arrangement where lights are on both sides of the road, alternating as we drive down the road. These are metal poles, also overhead fed. Looking at the existing lighting infrastructure, all the existing lights out there are high pressure sodium lights. Now, the pole...
Did this on purpose.
the poles are painted, they're not rusted. Some we found out while we were out there. And the metal poles do have existing foundations that are starting to corrode, and this is something we've seen across multiple poles out there. The metal poles in the staggered arrangement along the south side of the road are all 150 watt high pressure sodium lights and about 35 feet. All the lights along the north side of the road are also 35 feet. They're wood poles, and they seem to be in slightly better condition than the metal poles. And again, all the lights out there are high pressure sodium, and that's a source that is no longer used in the roadway lighting, and roadway lighting now is mostly all LED lighting. Some of the benefits of LEDs is it's a white light source, which improves nighttime visibility. And one of the ways we improve nighttime visibility is through the color rendering ability of the light, which means how well that light makes an object appear in its natural color. We measure that in a color rendering index. It's on a scale of 0 to 100, whereas the sun is a perfect 100. It has objects appear under the sun exactly how they should appear. Now, a typical LED streetlight has a CRI of approximately 70, which is sufficient for rendering color for what we need for the nighttime on the roadway. It doesn't measure each shade of green or blue differently, like something you would want in a museum. But it does render what color your car is. We've all been in a parking lot with a high pressure sodium light and have had a hard time looking at your car like, is that mine, is that red, or is that green? And it's because that high pressure sodium doesn't render color as well because it's not a white light source. It's that muddy orangish. And that's what this picture of this car is detailing here. You can see the crisp red on the front of the car under an LED and the muddy brown under the HPS light on the far right-hand side.
And just so you know, we have a screen here. If it looks like we're all looking here,
Yeah.
it's because there's a screen.
Chuck informed us about
Okay.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah, got it.
Yeah.
We were prepared on that one.
Okay. Thanks, Chuck.
So another example of that improved nighttime visibility is seen in this image here. We could, on the left-hand side, we get LEDs. You can see the green of the foliage, and you can tell that is you can tell it, well, I guess you can't tell if it's concrete or asphalt. It looks concrete to me. But on the right-hand side, you can't tell the color of the foliage, the color of the lines along the road, along the path there. And another thing to notice is the control of light that we get from an LED. If we look at the luminaire themselves, on the left side, you don't see any light coming out of it. But on the right side, we see those lens flares from that light, and that's the source of the light. That's contributing to sky glow and light pollution, and that's wasted light and wasted energy. So not only do LEDs improve nighttime visibility, but they also improve the control of light. And we can have less light and still get the same, if not enhanced visibility under that white light versus that muddy brown light that we get out of a high pressure sodium. So now that we've kind of covered the benefits of LEDs and the existing layouts out there, we want to talk about the recommendations and the lighting options we've prepared. We've prepared 4 different lighting options. And I just want to start by kind of reminding you guys of what the layout is out there. We do have the single-sided arrangement on the north side. There is no lighting near 500 West and Mavita, and then again, a staggered arrangement on the south side.
May I ask one quick question before we get off LEDs versus sodium? So if a sodium lamp is 150 watts, how many watts is a typical LED bulb?
The equivalent amount of light is about half the wattage. So a 150 watt LED would be replaced with a 70 or 60 watt LED, or 150 watt HPS, my apologies, would be replaced with a 70 or 60 watt LED.
So I take it then sodiums must be more efficient than incandescent light bulbs, because when I swap out my incandescent bulb in my kitchen, I get a much better ratio.
Absolutely, yeah. And what's sacrificed there is the color rendering. That's why they have used that. They've standardized on that in the past. Is it's much more efficient, energy efficient, although it doesn't render color as well. It's still a light source.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So just a quick reminder of what's out there. Now, at the very minimum, we recommend that Moab updates all lights to LED lighting. Now, some of the benefits of that would be the enhanced control of the light. What is not included in that is this dark spot that's south of 500 West, as well as it doesn't light the sidewalk on the additional sidewalk that will be going in on the west side of the road. This option would cost approximately $20,000 to $30,000. It would include just 46 new LED luminaires and no additional infrastructure or lighting or electrical infrastructure outside of those luminaires. One step up from that, and something that could be discussed with UDOT, is to supplement the existing lighting layout out there and continuously light just the east side of the road. Now, to do that would require an additional 8 luminaires, and what that would include is new pole foundation and electrical infrastructure. Now, this option would sufficiently light the multi-use path along the east side of the road. However, it will not get light all the way across the road onto that west side sidewalk and those intersections on the west side of the road. The third option is one of the options that we as Clanton & Associates recommend. This option is to continuously light the east side of the road, as well as provide light at conflict points on the west side of the road. Now, we define conflict points as intersections, pedestrian crossings, or mid-block crosswalks, anywhere where there's a possible vehicle-pedestrian conflict. Now, this option, again, will sufficiently light the multi-use path along the east side of the road, provide enough light to meet roadway lighting criteria on the roadway, as well as light the conflict points where there could be accidents involving vehicles and pedestrians, as well as any vehicles that are making turns on and off of this roadway. Now, this option, the cost we've prepared is $850,000 to $950,000, but this is assuming 66 new luminaires, complete comprehensive improvements, new electrical infrastructure underground, new luminaires, pole foundation, all of the above, brand new system. Now, finally, the last option we prepared is to continuously light both sides of the road. Now, this will provide sufficient and adequate light without overlighting the roadway. It just meets criteria, so it's something we recommend. And having more lights out there, we can lower the amount of light from each one, reducing the glare, light pollution, and light trespass that might be out there. Now, this again is completely comprehensive new system, new lighting and electrical infrastructure, looking at a cost of $1.2 to $1.4 million. Now, regardless of the lighting option, the lighting strategy that the city of Moab decides to implement, we recommend that Moab looks at a dynamic lighting control system. Now, a dynamic lighting control system is something that can take this lighting layout, no matter what it is, and make it specific to Moab. And by doing that, you can dim it based on the hours of the day. So between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., when there's a lot less density of cars and pedestrians on the roadway, we can reduce light levels, which reduces light trespass, light pollution, and energy usage. And as well, dimming system will allow you to respond to any complaints from occupants. And lastly, when we design lights for roadways, we design for the full light cycle of the luminaire. So it will be brighter when it's purchased, and over time it will dim and wear out. So by using a dimming system, we can dim them initially, and then over time brighten them back up to maintain a consistent level of light on the roadway. Now, one option is a standalone time-based system. This is a simple system that is at each light, and each light will need to be individually programmed. So if there's a complaint from a resident, someone will need to go to that light, get up to the luminaire, and reprogram that dimming. A system like this costs approximately $40 per pole. Now, a more comprehensive system would be a networked lighting control system. Now, the first step to this is each luminaire would need an individual node that communicates with a wireless system. Then a city official, maintenance crew, Chuck here, could log in through a website on his tablet, mobile phone, or at his office computer, and can check each and every individual luminaire out there on the road. Now, this is more of an asset management system. It'll let you know if a light has died, if the conduit has been pulled, someone's stealing the copper, if it was cut.
Is that a thing?
It actually, yeah,
It's a huge thing. Yeah.
It's a huge thing.
I've seen miles of streetlights denuded of their copper down south.
Is this SCADA all over again? SCADA? Yeah, I thought so.
SCADA system.
So do you guys ever put motion sensors on?
Anyway.
You guys put motion sensors under these things instead of a clock? And what do you do about different seasons? You know, some summertime you don't.
Yeah, it's based around, it's an astronomical dimming system. So it's based on where your specific location on the planet. It plays in your latitude and longitude. So it knows in the summer to turn the lights on at 9 o'clock, and in the winter to turn the lights on at 6 o'clock.
Oh, so it knows the time of year, the day of year.
Yes. Yeah, and so this will allow for real-time dimming. So if you have a resident who's complaining, hey, my light is too bright, Chuck can walk out there, or his crew can walk out there and be like, what do you think about it now? Okay, is this dim enough? Is this dim enough? And so it's real-time. I think Chuck's willing to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so a system like this is approximately $200 per light, and that includes all the hardware and software, and a 10-year software agreement, including any updates to that software. So large upfront costs will cover you for the next 10 years, approximately the life of the luminaire as well. Last week,
I just asked something, Chuck, opinion, would a system that's $200 a light with that type of monitoring capability reduce actual energy use and money spent on electricity because it would help us more properly manage the bright times or whatever?
The answer is yes. Absolutely. Yeah, we've had those discussions, and that's one of the advantages of the system, not just the control you have, but it lets you control the brightness, which is a function of the energy that goes into it.
Yeah.
So by dimming during those hours, you can save electricity as opposed to just constant bright in the middle of the night when really it's not needed. Because a big part of the street lighting, I just want to quickly say, is because the reason we looked at this so hard is because the widening project's going to put that new sidewalk along the west side, and there's already pedestrian use on that shoulder. And you know, if that area grows, or as it grows, there's going to be more pedestrians. So they think there'll be an opportunity for streetlights to maybe be needed out there. And by putting these kind of control systems in, we can lower the energy, minimize the energy costs.
But isn't that possible with the $40 going to the light and dimming?
That's what happens now at a few streetlights in the city. Our crew actually does go out and do that. It's pretty labor intensive. So
it's not just like at the house where you go.
Probably not.
Someone's got to go find the dimmer and then
you climb up the pole, right?
Yeah, and go to the luminaire, right? Yeah, it's not like down on the side.
You don't have Bluetooth for 30 feet?
Well, that's the $200
no, that's what
option.
the more expensive option is.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are technologically.
Sorry to interrupt.
I got one.
Keep going. No, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Lastly, we wanted to talk more about one specific area of the multi-use path. For the most part, the streetlights sufficiently light the multi-use path along the east side of the road. And they do that through backlight out of the luminaire, and it's something that we can use with LEDs. We have precise control of the light. So currently these lights are throwing light all the way up towards the slick rock out there. And we can take an LED light and control that so the light will end just past the multi-use path and sufficiently light that without polluting the whole entire hillside. The one spot where this multi-use path is not sufficiently lit by streetlights is behind the Moab Springs Ranch, where the path deviates from the road and gains elevation. So there's not only are there a lot of trees blocking the streetlights, but just how far away the path is and how much higher it is, there's no way that the streetlights will get enough light back there.
Headlamps are a really good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that. Okay.
Or
yeah. The two options we've proposed are bollard lighting, which is approximately 36 inches tall or waist height, or pedestrian level lighting, which is about 12 feet tall. Now, bollard lights provide a small pool of light in front on the path and are grateful for wayfinding. And to continuously light this path, we need approximately 18 bollards. It costs about $100,000 to $110,000. Where pedestrian level lighting are taller, they have a much wider distribution. And to continuously light the path with a pedestrian level light, we need 5 lights, and it costs $70,000 to $80,000. Now, we've also looked into solar options for pedestrian lighting out there. And the issue with that, with all those trees right there on that side of the road, there's not enough direct sunlight to have individual solar-powered lights along that path. If solar was something you guys would be more interested in, it would require a remote solar array, and you'd still have to route wiring and conduit to each individual light.
But is that are you saying just for that one section that goes up?
Just for that one section, yes.
I mean, but could you do solar for the rest of the multi-use path?
If you wanted to have additional pedestrian lighting infrastructure, which the studies we have done, it's not needed. We have the street lights, they provide enough light out there anyway.
So I got one question, if I may, Mayor. Sorry, what you guys are doing, I'm pretty cool with lighting paths. We can talk at all about the right level of that. But my big question is, why do we talk about illuminating? We're talking about a 5-lane highway, okay? And cars have headlights. So why do we talk about trying to illuminate the roadway itself ever? I mean, I can see the illuminating paths on both sides, but why the roadway?
So the major issue is that this roadway is a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. And current studies by the Virginia Technical Transportation Institute, VTTI, have shown that at speeds of 30 miles per hour or greater, the safe stopping distance for headlights to actually see, identify, and react to an object in the roadway isn't sufficient for a headlight. So supplemental street lighting is necessary in that case to help people identify objects or conflicts in the road.
Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes our presentation. Any additional questions or concerns?
I'm sure I'll think of one about 3 o'clock this morning.
That was really thorough. Thank you, Chuck, for bringing this to us for consideration, especially before any plans are made for the street lighting, so that we can digest it and then come to you with, any, with the options we want to proceed with, right?
Yes, you're welcome. And UDOT is, again, at this point, going to put conduit and junction boxes in at their cost, so there will be opportunities if council wants to do something later for that.
So one of the price structures for the 850,000 to $1 million, it included conduit. Is that different, or is that?
I saw it did include conduit too, and that you would subtract out.
Okay, so
though
it could
UDOT
be
at this
less?
time is only going to put it on one side, so that the west side, so
Gotcha.
that'd be about half of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. No clapping. No clapping. No clapping. So grumpy mayor. Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
I move to go into closed session.
Thank you, Connie.
Second.
Thank you, Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Closed session, here we come. Should we specify who first? I think I'd like to do.
Could you specify why we're closed sessions we're going into
Just
for the recording, please?
Do all three?
2 council members. So
If you could just read them, that'd be great.
okay. We will be going into closed session 11-1, strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of property. 11-2, strategy session to discuss reasonably imminent and or pending litigation. 11-3, discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual